words. In such wise, we will be able to achieve this laudable goal. Good morning once more again. The management and members of staff of Think Make Nigeria, all speakers here present, invited guests and delegates here present, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I stand in here on behalf of the Managing Director, your son, of FHA, Senator Benga Shafa, a man with a good character, a man with a good heart, a man who follows every passion with great dexterity. He's one of us here who has decided to reposition Federal Housing Authority, and he has asked me to graciously represent him here, knowing fully well as we speak now that we just have a new board, and so they're having their first meeting today and then tomorrow. My name is once more again Mr. Neto Thomas. I'm a quantity surveyor by profession, and incidentally, I head the procurement and general duties department of Federal Housing Authority. Yeah, keynote address delivered by Senator Benga on his behalf, Ashafa Managing Director, Chief Executive of Federal Housing Authority, at the Real Estate Discussions Award ceremony here today and tomorrow at the Co Hotels Suits Victoria. You know, when you are given an assignment, you try as much as possible not to sway away from the call issues. I will take it as it were here. Now, 2020 was adversely affected by one singular risk, and of course, that's COVID-19. This had global impact on Africa, was not left out. It disrupted supply chains and slowed down economic growth. Worst hit were the oil and gas industry, aviation, hospitality, tourism, manufacturing, and entertainment sectors. Now, a potent mix of strict protests and social media gave young Nigerians a voice that shattered the country's culture of difference. As the NSAS hashtag went viral, so did a defiance of the elite in Nigeria. It is estimated that the aftermath of the NSAS protests resulted in the destruction of assets over 2 trillion naira and Adamawa states. Now, in 2021, people have come to terms with the effects of COVID-19 and are beginning to adjust. It is observable that growth in demand for quality products will increase. Life also, as we used to know, it has been significantly altered. Real estate investment is a pedestal for economic growth and development. It is the bedrock upon which many countries have attained a vibrant economy. Real estate has always been a booming opportunity for investors in Africa. Now, the continuous growth of African urban areas creates a demand for increasing high quality commercial and residential real estate properties. The National Population Commission says that 50% of Nigeria's population of about 182 million is less than 30 years of age. Some studies put the median age at about 18 years. This population grows at about 3.5% annually. When this is weighted against such indices as rising life expectancies and declining infant mortality, the population of the young people is growing rapidly. Now, these young people will migrate to urban centers in search of the proverbial global fleece. This will in turn increase urban population. Now, real estate and GDP are interwoven. They each contribute to the growth of the other. Housing, though one of the basic needs of man, is however not only shelter. It also facilitates holistic development within a planned economy. Safe, secured, and affordable housing leads to a better quality of life for citizens. Now, real estate has contributed to GDP by increasing revenues invested in real estate compared to other forms of investment. Real estate is the second largest employer of labor in Nigeria after agriculture. Now, it employs construction workers, developers, builders, civil engineers, estate surveyors, quantity surveyors, and all the property consultants and stakeholders. Now, Africa's real estate markets have, however, traditionally of usable data of doing business. And let's look at drivers of real estate investment. Guide investors' decisions and include this includes urbanization trend, industrialization, infrastructures, government policies and legislation, finance, and technology. Now, if we take urbanization trend, as earlier elucidated, Nigerians' growing population will initiate the demand for various types of real estate. 2, industrialization. We continue, okay, even though formal industries are decreasing, smaller informal startups are increasing, and this will be accompanied by a rapid growth in the real estate sector. Now, if you look at infrastructure, shortages in infrastructures will generate openings for investment, and demand for investment in infrastructure will continue to be driven by growth sectors, rail, roads, public transports, and utilities are also essential for the success of any urban center. Now, if we look at government policies and legislation, you look at the influence of government policies and legislation on decision to invest will increase, while local partnership will become increasingly important. Now, let's take a look at finance. Availability, cost of funds, financial players, and their capacity to package favorable deals will continue to play a major role on investment decision. Diaspora financing will also gain more importance and fraction depending on government policies. Now, technology, current technology is predominantly brick and mortar. There is an urgent need to look at more enviable alternatives to reduce costs while enhancing efficiencies and minimizing environmental impact. The world as a whole is fast embracing smart technology, and Africa cannot afford to be left behind. The presence of technology will influence business and building processes as well as consumer behavior. Now, let's look at the challenges to real estate investment. Now, we look at the new risk. The emergence of new risk is one of the key predictions for Africa for 2021. These include insecurity, political instabilities, changes in government policies, problems of inequality leading to social instability, extreme dependence on natural resources and lack of economic diversity, unpredictability of local currencies against the US dollar. Note that we have just had a major policy shift in forests for the past 2 or 3 weeks, whereas it is rising astronomically. Now, we look at the nature of title ownership. A certificate of occupancy is essentially a long-term lease subject to all kinds of terms and conditions. There are usually issues of transparency and duration of processes, transfers as well as many other factors. Now, this problem is still manually operated. And the next one is shrinking economy and high unemployment. In the second quarter of 2020, labor section, poor or non-existent infrastructure. But the real estate sector remains the asset of choice for investment. A boost in growth is expected despite the COVID-19 headwinds, which will provide opportunities in the various sectors. Now, demand for residential real estate is expected to rise as work from home becomes a more permanent influence. There is an observable shift towards 1 and 2 bedroom flats in strategic locations. Also, there is a desirable demand for short stay and apartments with flexible rent payments plan. Now, demand for commercial properties is likely to remain at current rates, despite the transition from physical office building to remote working from home. This is because in the long haul, the need to interact is likely to overweigh virtual working, which is a thrill at the moment. In the short run, landlords will have to make large concessions at commencement of lease. Demand is also likely to tend towards office spaces close to residential properties as companies seek short-term leasing opportunities for employees working remotely. Now, repairs and rebuilding of properties that were destroyed or damaged during the EndSARS protest are likely to continue. Now, demands on retail properties such as malls, which have been adversely affected by the effects of COVID-19, are likely to pick up a bit slowly due to economic downturn. In the long run, however, demand will pick up with some adjustments such as online shopping, increased use of retail apps, etc. In the industrial subsector, demand for more warehouses and logistics will increase due to the impact of COVID-19 and the shift from physical stores to online shopping. In the hospitality subsector, demand for hotel properties may see slight improvements toward the end of the year as travel restrictions are lifted. The major challenge will be the third wave of COVID-19. We trust, however, that human resilience will ultimately triumph. Now, demand for bare lands will increase due to shifts across the subsector. There will be preference for mixed-use development, which will be guided by the increasing demand for high-quality technologically driven, eco-friendly environments. There will also be an observable increase in demand for real estate technology solutions as efficiency enhanced in real estate products delivery. The real estate value chain will become more prominent. Wise investors will look to invest in areas of specific components in the building value chain, such as the sanitary wares, doors, windows, and other sectors of building materials. Now, may I conclude by suggesting that when deciding to invest in Africa, it is important that investors explore the potentials of local partnerships. Not only may this be required by legislation, like Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission, ICRC, ECT, but such a partnership could also bring local expertise to help identify and overcome difficulties in doing business in the local environment. Partners can also help to spot potential changes in policies, shifts in trends, allowing foreign investors with a limited local presence to make informed decisions on future real estate investment. Real estate markets work best when authorities take the right policies decision. The other stakeholders or players play their role, and there is good interaction between the two sides. Finally, the authority, that is the Federal Housing Authority, which is the most visible representative of government in the housing sector, has a vibrant partnership department through which about 20% of all her products are rolled out. We look forward to having you as partners, and we look to an open or to a more open projects countrywide, especially Federal Housing Authority's new Abuja city, which is being proposed and is envisaged to sit on over 700 hectares of land. May I, at this point, say thank you to everyone who has listened, and I pray that God will help us and bless all our deliberations here today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's interesting to know you're a Lagosian, but you don't look like a Lagosian anymore. Oh, okay, that is the spirit of real estate transformation. You know, and thank you so very much for your presentation, sir. And it's always great to know that people like you can tell stories of what Festac used to be and how things were in those days. Those are times when value, obviously, of trumps over, monetary and greedy ambitions. And there's a need for us to go back to that part of way of thinking as a people in order for us to be able to do as much as we can. Interesting enough, you mentioned, sir, that the real estate industry has a way of intermixing with some of the benefits of the transportation sector. And I know that with good roads, estates are much more accessible. That even makes the value of the whatever property it is even rise up beyond what you would have even projected. So there is no denying ourselves the fact that the second largest employer of labor being the real estate sector. So, but some people might debate that and say, no, perhaps it's the first. But I guess the data that we have obviously points to the fact that the agri sector as well as the real estate sector obviously play the same role, because you need land to farm. At the same time, you need land to build the houses, you need land to build the silos. And so the opportunities in the real estate industry is quite broad, and it's important for us to begin to look at that. Thank you so very much as being one of our sponsors. We recognize you particularly. And so at this point, please, can we put our hands together one more time for Mr. Neto presenting for Senator Gbenga Ashafa. Federal Housing Authority is a very smart organization, and we've seen some of the works you are doing. That helps, as a matter of fact, to see exactly some of the issues with policy can be explored further. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I'm not so very happy because I know the COVID-19 actually took a lot of us. Some of us have lost loved ones, some have lost friends, some have lost even spouses. And for me to have received the sad news this morning that one of the men who was, as a matter of fact, my speaker for the virtual edition of Reda last year, actually passed on. And it shocked me this morning. And so on behalf of the organizers, I would like us to please be upstanding as we observe 1 minute silence for Mr. Mukhtar Aliyu of Urban Shelter. May the souls of the departed rest in peace. Amen. But this also tells us the fact that at the end of the day, every single one of us is just turn by turn. Me that is standing here, it might be today, it might be tomorrow, it might be next year, it might be 50 years from now. Nobody knows. The more important for us to begin to look at life and everything that we do, to have some kind of view that someday it is the impact, the imprint that we leave behind that will make all of the difference. And so this really touched me because it was a gentleman I was looking forward to doing one or two things with. So what it tells you is that don't ever waste time. Whatever opportunity you have right now, you take it. It's rather quite sad. And I want to say a big thank you to every one of us, especially the first plenary session that I have several of my speakers in the house. I know Mr. Ayo Ibaru is here from North Court, is the CEO. Mr. Odunayo Ojov, the CEO of UPDC PLC. I'm so excited to see you personally, sir. Most of the time it's on the pages of the newspaper, you know, and you look very different. Anyway, Hendu Plexix, country manager of Novera, is obviously going to be joining us, as well as Funke Okubadejo, who will basically be dealing with the first plenary session. But before we go ahead, we'd like to hear one or two remarks from one of our sponsors as well, and that is FHA Mortgage Bank, who is apparently our guest speaker, the MDC, who Mr. Ayatuddin Awal. On his behalf, Madam Monsurat Mohammed is going to make one or two remarks, and we'll say a big thank you to the sponsors as well. Please put your hands together for Madam Monsurat. The more you clap, the more houses you have. All right.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming for this edition of the Real Estate Market and Signals. On behalf of FHA Mortgage Bank, I'm representing my MD. I want to thank the organizers of this event for organizing this event and recognizing the need for people to come together and discuss on this matter, because it's a very, very crucial aspect of the economy. Being an industry player, I'll tell you this: housing is key. Just like you have, it's been said, all the philosophy papers that apart from food, the next thing you think about is shelter. However, shelter has to be all inclusive. Shelter has to be encompassing. Shelter has to be healthy. And with the coming of COVID-19, we all realize how important having a well-standard shelter is to everyone. You need to have a good housing because your housing, wherever you're staying, improves your standard of living. If you stay in the slum, you have the attendant effects of staying in the slum. If you stay in a well-ventilated and well-articulated environment, you also have the attendant effect of staying in such environments. And we also realize that the level of awareness on housing market is very low in Nigeria. Yes, governments, we all also have our individual roles to play as individuals because the government is made of people and we also are the people. So when we come together and sit and make policy, discuss the challenges we have, we'll make recommendations to the government. That is how government can make policies that would make meaningful effects on our needs, especially on the issue of housing. Housing, affordable housing. Our keynote speaker talked about Festac Town, which is, I'm very sure you know, one of the biggest estates in West Africa. And we hope we get back to that regime where we have well-built estates that are affordable in the sense of being affordable to the civil servant, to the market woman, because people don't talk about the informal sector, but the informal sector also needs housing because housing is a basic necessity. So I want to thank the Think Means group for bringing this on board. This event is very important so that we get enlightened and understand what are the opportunities around us and how we could help. For those of us that are here, we could also inform our families, friends from whatever we learn from this event on opportunities that are available for them. Everybody deserves to have a house. You deserve to have a home. Not just anyhow houses, but well-built standard houses, affordable houses. And I bet you it is possible in collaboration with the private sector and the government. It's a private, public-private partnership arrangement now. And with FHA Mortgage Bank being a subsidiary mortgage bank, fully owned by the authority, will provide affordable financing, housing financing for both the formal and the informal sector. So I'm going to inviting us in this program to see the opportunities that are available, the abilities of the informations we're going to gather from here. They are going to build mega cities, and only when you are informed, that's when you can. For the organizers, thank you for coming. Every special guest here, all our guests, you're all welcome.
Thank you for thanking us, Maseraj. The beautiful thing with being a sponsor is that you have the opportunity to be on record of with some of the
this year's Reda. I want to thank my panelists once again for accepting to speak. My name is Aya, as you heard earlier, and we'll be looking at capital allocation and investment decisions in 2021. As a background, we all have an understanding of what happened last year and its resultant effects on Nigeria's economy. But what we found towards the end of last year
much to the organizers for inviting me. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me, and lovely to have to be able to share my perspectives with this audience. I think in terms of the question, I think it's multi-pronged in terms of how I would like to approach it. So I think one of the first things for us is that real estate is obviously long-term investment in nature. And, you know, we always go back to try and understand what are the drivers investment. Area, we will actually have consultants do a drive find, have an estimate of the number of people that can actually use the mall, the sizing, what is the spend, how much will the retailers that use the mall be able to afford. I think, you know, looking today, well over a decade, I think you have the likes of Northcote, Retail, Intel that I think is also going to be part of this program. I think it's great that we now have much better data that is available. So if anybody is going to be allocating capital, I think the first starting point is really ensuring you understand your market in terms of the data. I think the other thing to talk about is what I term to be an evolved strategy. I think it's very important to realize that the market is dynamic. Even though real estate is multi-year investment, there's a need for you not just to understand what is happening now, but also begin to try and forecast what would happen over time. So I think initially our strategy was always just based on what we call the dearth of supply. There was just lack of adequate supply of most sectors. We basically focus more on the commercial sector. And in doing that, you know, it was about new developments into the market. I'll say today, the market has evolved. Supply has been coming. And so there is even more pressure for anyone that is investing to ensure they fully understand which sectors they're investing and what the supply demand dynamics and what that's going to happen to the cash flows in that sector. That said, development is the highest risk that you can get into. There are other strategies that are lower risk, which could be buying assets that are already being created. So you'll see that there's going to be a trend wherein people are not going to be investing in already built into new developments, but will also be investing to ensure that
you doing anything to the audio?
institutional real estate when they are
Okay, now okay, first
for
people say
investment
mic.
and growing capital from the pension industry. So globally, pension industries are one of the largest investors in real estate. And I think there's going to be more demand for us to be able to provide the instruments or the avenues by which the pension industry can actually support real estate. I think the last thing I would want to talk about here is, I'm sure a lot of people are keen to understand our view about the sectors. And I don't think there's so much more to add to, even the speeches that we've heard, which I'm sure there's still a lot more discourse that's going to have in terms of, how the pandemic has impacted. But if you think about it in terms of evolved strategies, there are ways where you can play. So for instance, Actis pre-pandemic and currently, we are still investing in the hospitality sector, which probably arguably is one of the most impacted sectors by the pandemic. But doing this is about our conviction about the specific assets that we will be acquiring. New trends, but also by the pandemic. And for instance, we've invested in expanded our data center to actually build out more in terms of continue to invest as well as expand our existing data centers. I think I'm going to stop there.
Round of applause for that. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed, as they say. I'd like to thank the organizers, for inviting me to speak. And I would also like to share my thoughts on the efficient ways of investing in the real estate sector today. So I think Funke is right. You need to understand what the trends are. You need to understand what the market is saying. But most importantly as well, I think you also need to understand who you are as a player in this industry. You need to understand your strengths and your weaknesses. You need to understand what you're good at. And I think that's something that most people do not analyze property. Some other people are good at building property. Some people are good at attracting investment to property. I don't think we should try and do everything alone. I think we need to collaborate more and focus on our strengths. When we have identified what our strengths are and what the market wants, what we need to do is match those two. And I believe that would result in more effective delivery of the real estate products and services. And just in terms of the trends that we're beginning to see in the market, we're seeing a change, in the way people live and the way people work. COVID-19 has made it very clear to everyone that you don't necessarily have to go physically to work in order to achieve your corporate objectives. And we're seeing that in the types of products that are being developed. I was speaking to a friend some months ago, and he said, at some point, people were looking at 2-bedroom apartments as the sweet spot, extra room as an office, and then immediately from 2 beds being very hot, it became 2 bed plus, a study being very hot. And we all need to just respond to the market real time. And because real estate is a lagging industry, if you see a building come up today, I think it's a result of decisions that may have been made 3 years prior in terms of planning approval, in terms of getting the contractor. So we need to get to the point where we are very nimble in the way we take decisions and make decisions. We've also seen changes in asset classes that people didn't used to pay attention to, like logistics, industrial. And given that people now need to distribute medical products, from vaccines to cold chains and things like that, these are areas where I think investors can begin to look at to be more efficient. Thank you.
A round of applause for that, please. That was a lot of experience compressed into one answer. When Funke said that they were making a decision to now invest in hospitality and data centers, it's something that the data had begun to show us, at Northcote, and it just reflects the changing perspectives towards capital allocation. And I think that's what leads me to the next question that I have for you, sir. So what do you think are the critical changes in capital allocation that investors need to make so that they can face the future effectively? Because now demand is changing, supply should also change, and expectations as to what the returns on investment in the real estate sector should be are also beginning to change.
Thank you, Ayo, for that question. It's a very important question because capital allocation is a subject that many people don't really fully understand or even pay attention to. So we talk about capital allocation. What it effectively means is that you want to know the most efficient ways to deploy your financial resources as a person or as a company. As individuals, we all have limited resources. As organizations, we have limited resources. And the strategies that underpin our choices of where to put our resources is linked to our unique position and unique circumstances. So I wouldn't say there's a one straitjacket, one cap fits all approach to capital allocation. It depends on a few factors. One of the factors is your source of capital in the first place. Some organizations like Actis have the opportunity to raise funding that they can deploy over, some organizations like UPDC are listed on the capital market and they can raise funds that are more longer term, 20, 25 years. Some organizations go to the banks to raise some of their financing and they don't have more than 2, 3, 4, 5 years to utilize and return the capital. So first and foremost is to understand your source of capital. I think that will determine how you allocate the capital in the first place. The second point has to do with how much risk you are willing to take with your capital. So your risk appetite, so you want to deploy the capital. Some people are more comfortable with investing in riskier assets. Some people are more comfortable with just going it easy. This morning we were talking about Bitcoin and, everybody started talking about, will I put my money in Bitcoin? Wouldn't I put my money in Bitcoin? And those sentiments are directly linked to our risk appetite. So it's very important to understand what our risk appetite is. And then thirdly is our understanding of return benchmarks. Some people are very, very okay with 10% return. Some are very fine with 15%. Some will never do or allocate their capital in any project that does not return minimum of 30%. And it all depends on who you are as an investor and your principles of investment. But having laid the affecting capital allocation, I believe that in 2021, to be efficient, one has to look at certain areas where capital allocation can really allow us to function and survive into the future. One of it is liquidity. We know that the real estate industry is typically an illiquid, investment in illiquid assets. So it's not easy to sell, it's not easy to transfer. So even though it's long-term and it's enduring, you may not be able to easily convert real estate to cash. So as an organization or as a person or as an investor for liquidity, and I believe in our capital allocation, we should put a little bit of our capital into something that can easily be converted to cash when you need it. And why is that? Because of risk. Sometimes there might be short-term shocks. Like last year, a lot of property investors in commercial properties could not get rents from their tenants. And if you cannot get rent from the tenant and you already had ongoing liabilities that need cash, what are you going to do? You have an asset that you cannot easily sell. And so liquidity, I think, is one of the factors that we should look at in terms of capital allocation. And then sometimes very, very liquid. REITs invest in shares. Is asset allocation for capital allocation for assets that bring you cash flows. So because of the need to keep on running an organization, you need assets that give cash flow. So investment properties that can easily give you annuity income, and such type of assets are very good at times when there are uncertainties, and they keep your operations going as well. So I would say assets that give cash flows are another areas where investors should look at in terms of capital allocation. And lastly is allocating capital to assets that give capital appreciation. So these are a little bit more longer term, but they hedge you against inflation. They hedge you against the issues of the devaluation of your currency. They hedge you against, economic downturns, because over the long term, the assets generally grow in value. So I would say these three buckets are very important in terms of how people allocate capital. One is for liquidity, second is for cash flow, and third is for capital appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Let's put our hands together for him. It was a very extensive response. I guess my next question will be to Funke, because, like you earlier informed us, Actis has been investing, and I must say, as we all agree, relatively successfully in Nigeria for about 16 years. And it means that you understand just what it takes to get things done in Nigeria. So, whenever there's a conversation around investing in Nigeria, it's always about this risk or that risk, how will you get your money out? There's so many questions that one has to answer. Now, in your experience, what have you found as the best systems, as the best ways to mitigate, market volatility and all those kinds of risks?
Sure, thank you. I think the way Otayo highlighted, or the capital allocation also really speaks to how we look at things generally. When we think about, and I think I'd like to bring it home. We've seen in the recent past, I'll say since 2016. I think one overall principle there is about liquidity, cash flow management. I think that's the critical risk that you have to deal with real estate because of the nature. And the way you deal with that will be a combination in terms of how proactive you are in managing your cash flows. And in particular, to now say, you're also looking at how much equity that you bring in. So one of the key things is that you can't afford to have too much leverage in your deals, over reliance on debt. I think there are parts of our investment that definitely has to be funded by equity, land, pre-development, such that before you have good visibility on your cash flows, you can't afford to have debt or too much debt in your project. So I think that's one of the things that I'll say in the more recent past we'd have to focus on closely. It can be, and you know, most projects, the overall success and failure of the projects is based on that. The other thing I've said is, and it relates to the point about understanding the market and the addressable market. When there is high growth, maybe when we're growing about 7% year on year, people can be, you could afford to be a bit more speculative in terms of saying, if I build it, they will come. At this point in time, it's very difficult to foresee anybody going ahead and doing things that are speculative, particularly in the commercial area. So we find the more disciplined investors will basically ensure they meet some minimum threshold in either pre-let or pre-sales of projects, so that you are not relying and not implicate any projects. Thirds will be, we should be as non-speculative as possible. And secondly is in terms of your cash flows management and liquidity and the level of risk that you are taking on the projects being managed more closely.
Very much for that. I think what stuck to me, and I will still go back and watch this to just learn in land or in capital assets, or even in various areas, and that's why we find that taking data-driven decisions, working with professionals who know what they're doing, always brings out looking at bringing up something new to the market as a way of supply. What have you found as the most practical methods to raising funding that can get projects across to the finish line?
Thanks, Ayo, for that question. This is a developer's nightmare, I think. Raising money, looking for money. We've all been there. We are all looking for money.
Sorry, if it's a nightmare, why is everybody laughing? What did I miss? What did I miss?
People are laughing because they understand what I'm talking about.
So you explain to me later. All right. Please continue.
So funding is a very, very critical part of real estate development. And why is that? Real estate is capital intensive. We've said that. But we also exist in an environment where the cost of capital is very high. Whether it's debt or equity is high. If anybody gives you their money now, they're looking for 100% return. And that's why all these wonder banks are doing very well. Our expectations are very high in terms of return. So as a developer, we know that we cannot outpace the market in terms of our expectations. So we need to look at creative ways of raising funding. Interestingly, I was with Jide, the MD of Octo5, a few days ago, and we were talking about why are we all small players in this market? That discussion kept ringing in my head. If you look at the dollar value of everything we're all doing, put together as players in the market, the so-called big boys in the market, we are all small boys. And the reason is that we do not have that ability to attract huge financing to do huge projects that can address and make a dent in the demand that we have. So we talked about how we can bridge that funding gap. And one of the key areas is through partnerships. and through collaboration. If we come together and we bring our strengths and bring our resources, we can do bigger deals and then, use economies of scale to reduce our costs and to deploy even bigger projects and do bigger things. So one of it is partnerships. And when I talk about partnerships, I'm talking about things as simple as joint ventures. Somebody has land, the other person has capital to build, they can come together, and that's a form of financing and funding in itself. We also have public-private partnerships where we all know that government still has the largest pool of or access to land in Nigeria. You can partner with a government entity or government itself to give you access to land, thereby reducing your capital requirement for acquiring land. And then you split the returns and share the risk as well. In addition to partnerships, we can look at what I call collaborations. And how I want to differentiate that is because there's a value chain in real estate development or delivery. You've got contractors, you've got architects, you've got brokers. All these people can actually participate in the process of funding real estate. It's just how creative we want to be. So for example, your contractor can provide contractor finance and enable you to even start the project and defer their own payments to the end or after you've sold, because we have contractors with excess capacity now. They have their machines that are idle, they have their workers at home. They would rather deploy that capital at risk in part and get their money when something has been built and when something has been sold. So we should not shy away from looking at creative ways. I'm looking at practical ways to your question to address this problem of financing. Also, the good old traditional pre-payments, plan sales, pre-leases, and effectively bringing people on board early in the life of the development to support you in your cash flows. We've talked about cash flows today. It's very, very crucial. So bringing people on board might mean giving them a deal, might mean reducing the price or reducing, your return. But ultimately, it's a way of sharing risk and funding the project indirectly. Another area is the area of using technology, or what people now call Proptech, and the area of crowdfunding. It's an area where I think a lot of interest is being raised right now. There are a few people who have trailed the blaze, in this area. We know, apps like Store and so many other people who are coming on board to use platforms such as technology or apps to raise financing from individuals. So individuals want to have exposure to real estate, but they don't have the huge capital to invest. You can use crowdfunding platforms to bring people together in a form of collective investment, and then into units, and you can sell those units like shares, and people can own a bit of a big asset, and thereby use that to raise finance. So these are some of the areas in which I think people can get creative and look outside the usual, let me go to the bank to borrow money or use only my money as equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Let's put our hands together for him. It started with a nightmare, but it seems like it ended well. Okay, I will ask Funke, who has been very kind to have waited so long before we started, the last question. So we're having a conversation December 2021, and we're looking at what has happened gone by would be the difference and projects that didn't do well?
I'm not going to be saying anything new, actually. And I think the first thing I was going to say when I looking at that question is that, real estate is, I don't think there's anyone who will know the results of what they did, or very few people will know the results of what they did this year by December of this year. So, and that's the nature of the beast of real estate. It's about saying, how well can you understand the dynamics and how can you predict what will happen in the market in the long run. So we process, which means that there are fundamental principles that you need to just try to apply and understand. And real estate itself, I always tell people, so it's not a commodity. So there's no sort of kind of a path that you can apply. It's just saying, how do you find the information that is important as per what you want to do in particular? And you can have a very successful project, maybe within 200 meters, and another project that's just 200 meters away failed miserably. And you want to understand why is that the case. So it is so important for you, whatever that you are doing in real estate, to understand what will be the drivers for you. So let me give an example, and I'm going to go back into retail. What are the principles there? Visibility of your project, accessibility of your project, the ability for people to be able to get into your project from two directions, the catchment area and the sizing of the catchment area. Ultimately, in terms of the affordability and how much trade will happen within a particular environment. You can take that and also take that same principle into hospitality. What's your addressable market? How do you want to pitch your product that it will be? I think taking away from that, and this is just to say, what makes one project successful and different from the other is the discipline of understanding the drivers of success and keeping to it and saying, so for instance, we found in the past, a lot of people say, we happen to have this piece of land, which is our family land. And because of that, we want to do a project. The first thing is you will say, what is the best location for my project, irrespective of whether I own land or not. And it's not trying to force fit things into that. So I think that principle is very, very important. I think the principle of liquidity that we've spoken about, which also Oduayo has spoken to, which is understanding your cash flows and being able to finance the project to the end, and also to be able to manage any volatility in liquidity by ensuring you have the right amount of capital in the project. That is also very critical. I think also having a good view in terms of expectation of rentals and cash flows is also important. I think one of the things that people underestimate is that if we have, 100,000 houses being built in Lekki, and today somebody else added another 100,000, there's going to be a glut there. So you have to have an idea to say, how am I even going to impact the market? And on what basis am I planning to ensure that we have realistic targets? I think we all lived in a world where there was one building, as far as I knew, or two, that were getting rent of over $1,000. And the idea was that everybody else that would build would also have that. I think at the time when we did a project, our expectation of rentals was that the market was going to go down. And I think when we built, and a lot of people had the idea to say, oh, you see the rents are falling, but any developer would have known that you're not expecting to add so much supply and to have the same impact. So as long as you planned with the right expectations, you were still successful, even though the rents went down. And that's what people don't understand. So there's a lot of thought that will determine the ultimate success of a project. And unfortunately, we don't get those results, at least not in our own commercial world, within 3 or 4 days. So the results will always bear themselves out more in the medium to long term.
All right, a round of applause for that answer. Thank you very, very much for your audience. And I'd like to especially thank our panelists, Mr. Aduayo Ojo, CEO, UPDC PLC, and Mrs. Funke Okubadejo, Director of Real Estate at Actis. Thank you very much. We are grateful.
Knock, knock. Thank you. Please, can we, Madam Funke, can you come up? So we have a photo session for the records so that by December, at least we can show that we had this particular program. Ayo wanted Expo. I was looking for. No, I heard that's fantastic. The lady has to be in the middle. Great. We need to have this moment captured because images like this helps us to be able to. You can take it out briefly and then you can put. All right. Please, you want to also use a face mask. Please put on your face mask. We need another shot. No, one more shot with the face mask. It's important for protocol adherence. So that we know that during the Reda 2021, ThinkMeet actually upheld the protocols. Thank you so very much, Mr. Ayo. Fantastic moderation as always. Yeah. Thank you. I can't thank you enough. I know it's always wonderful working with you. Every time I see the fact that you're moderating any session, I know that it's always going to come forth excellently because some of those thoughts are actually impressive. And of course, Mr. Odunayo. Sorry, is it Odunayo or Odunayo? Okay, because I heard Funke mentioning Odunayo, so I think that's a much proper way to pronounce it, which means joy is plenty, and that happens because plenty property comes with that, and so that itself is a very good thing. Ladies and gentlemen, please mind me when I mentioned earlier on that we should uphold on your face. Please, you can cough all you want to cough as long as everything goes back into you. That makes it all fantastic. So please do not feel embarrassed. I don't intend to embarrass anybody. It's just for us to be careful. People like myself and Michael Jackson have been wearing face masks before even COVID-19. So it's not anything new for us. I'm going to be adjusting the program because I recognize that our keynote presenter has to be on his way, but we still have to tour the exhibition ground as well as obviously have some presentation coming up later on in the program. Mixed obviously as one of our key exhibitors has one or two presentations, but I really want to quickly confirm because I want to go into the plenary too. If Tosin Ajose is in the house. Oh, thank you very much. I'm glad she's here. So what I would do right now is that I'm just going to ensure that after this presentation by Mixed Africa, we're going to have the panel session, which is the role of gateway cities in the growth of real estate markets across Africa. A case study of Lagos, Nigeria. Well, I was thinking a case study would be Ogun State. I think Ogun State is the gateway state because this one that Lagos has to. So I will look forward to help me understand. I'd like to quickly invite to the podium Mrs. I got her right, Chief Commercial Officer for Mixed Africa, as she makes a presentation for the next few minutes. I'll give her 10 minutes so that she can maximize the moment. Please, if there's any slides you want to put up, please put your hands together for her.
I hope I can take this. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm actually really excited because I'm an industry newbie. I joined Mixed Africa about a year ago after having been an energy industry guru. So I did a whole career pivot. This is my first official industry assignment in the real estate business. So I'm really excited to join this very noble class of real estate practitioners. So what I'm going to be talking about today is why Lagos needs new towns. And I'm going to use that to showcase the rationale behind some of what we're doing. Excuse me. So let's start. I hope I can adjust this. Okay. So this was July 16, 2021. I'm sure many of us from my office on the top floor of a building in just off Zakatinobu, and I was able to see the Atlantic Ocean. And one of the first thoughts that came to my mind was actually how strong those barriers were, or those barriers will be. And actually, this was a particular season around the world where there were heavy rainfalls across many mega cities, places like Mumbai, even parts of Europe, such as Germany, experienced significant rainfall that day. So it was a single warning about what was to come. You can see Lagos Marina there, top left. I don't know where that is, but it's like some parts of the Lekki Express way. And these are the realities for us as everyday Nigerians. So what does this really say? One of the major issues that we face as a country is climate change. 90% urbanized cities, and cities are one of the largest emitters of emissions, carbon emissions. It's estimated by 2050, more than 800 million will be urban residents. And they could be affected by rising sea levels. And this is huge. But I think and the way we build communities are going to be key. And then show you is about different sides.
How many people here think that is true? legitimate aspect. We heard the reference to homes and houses sometimes being illiquid assets that you can't immediately dispose of. So if you suddenly to get a job in another city and you owned a home, how much would your mobility be affected? And I actually think that building a thriving rental market is key to building a thriving home ownership market. Why do I say that? A thriving rental market would be more competitive from a price perspective. If consumers pay attractive prices for rent, they can save up for a deposit to acquire a home. Myth 4, neighborhood stickiness. And I put a quote here, once a phase oneer, always a phase oneer. Is that true? So if you've lived on the mainland all your life, you probably tend to want to live on the mainland. That's the assumption. So when we talk about the location of some of our land bank at Mixter, we often get the retort that, well, you guys are so far away. But think back to 20 years ago, 25, 30 years ago. Most of the people that live in the Kate axis, in the Aja axis, Abraham Addison and further afield were actually people who relocated from the mainland or relocated from VI or Ikuri due to the increasing commercialization of those hubs. So what does this say? That if you build an attractive living proposition for consumers, most rational thinking consumers will get up and move. And finally, myth 5 about Lagosians, that Lagosians don't appreciate the natural environment. This is a really, really interesting one because I often, growing up, I used to hear my parents talk about the fact that, you know, IIT in Ibadan is such a wonderful place. You hear people talk about extol the virtues of Obudu Cattle Ranch. You hear things like those who want to move to the village and enjoy the fresh breeze and the flora and fauna and ecology. And actually back home at Mixter, we developed Lakaway Lakes Golf and Country Estate, where we sold over 200 housing units on that estate, 35 kilometers from the hustle and bustle of Lagos. And today on Lakaway, we have almost 100 people who live permanently on the estate. So why am I saying all this? I think it's important to bear in mind that the way we build community experience for consumers is really, really key to how they make choices. And this is why Lagos needs new towns. Back in the 1960s, London as a city had 8 million residents. Today, how many residents does London have? Just under 10 million. The same time period in the 60s, Lagos had under 1 million residents. And we all know population figure is today, roughly, but 20 million, at least today in 2021. So just compare that. So we see a 2,000% population growth in Lagos. And we often get told that one of the ways to adapt to that is to build high rises. The jury is still out to be seen as whether if we can't expand out, we need to go up. But the point is we're facing the twin impact of inadequate infrastructure and rapid urbanization. So this is Lagos New Town. We've decided to build a new town. For almost 20 years. One of our signature assets in this new town is Country Estate, Beach. This is about going beyond just trying to plug the brand. We do have a track record that spans over 20 years infrastructure. I have a story and also stop. On the day it flooded in Lagos, our CEO sent us, Mr. Deji sent us a WhatsApp on the management group and said, oh, look, it's flooded for the first time in over 20 years in Lakaway Lakes. And everybody was shocked. And we're quickly looking at the pictures. And he actually sent us a video. For the past 15 to 20 years since Lakaway Lakes was developed, not a single community in this Lagos New Town axis has experienced flooding. It doesn't mean that Mixter is more special than other developers, although we like to think we are, but it just really means that if we can plan and build our cities in such a way that we appreciate both the negative and positive impacts of nature and the natural environment and the realities of our susceptibility to climate change, then it is possible to build a Lagos that we all want to live and stay in. And we need to think about sustainability, how we build today without jeopardizing subsidizing the needs of future generations. So Lagos New Town is the new urban community where people can work, live and play. It's established more than 10 years ago. It's going to be a start. These are just some pictures for you to look at. We actually can have a conversation with trees. We have just a couple of things to talk about. Some of the things that will make this a reality. The private sector obviously cannot do it by itself. We have to do it in collaboration with government. We need government support. We obviously need master planning. There's also a question which, I wanted to see what the audience think. Do people think Nigeria's housing problem is a supply or a demand challenge? How many people think it's a supply challenge? Okay. How many people think it's a demand challenge? How many people think it's kind of both? Okay. I lean a bit more on the demand side. And I often wonder about that 17 million deficit myself, because I think one of the greatest paths to realizing some of these dreams is home acquisition. And the home acquisition paths that consumers have to acquire property. So master planning, government support, investment, obviously, infrastructure is a long-term game. We need long-tenured financing in this space at attractive low interest rates, I should add. We obviously need the additional infrastructure support from government around roads and bridges and transit points and transit systems. But this is the dream we are trying to create. So I invite you to engage with us. I invite you to come along with us on this journey. And I say that we want to build a Lagos that we would love for our future generations to live, work, and play and thank us for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reda. Please, can you put your hands together one more time for her? Chief Commercial Officer for Mixed Africa. My major concern is always the fact that no place is ever far if we have proper transport system. If the road infrastructure is one that is highly motorable, I'm very sure even if you live in Ekpe and you can make the projections of how long it's going to take you from Ekpe to the major hubs, or we are going to also explore different central business districts themselves. It's a factor that we must consider in our development, because sometimes, Reda, you were talking about walkability. A lot of us like to walk, but in Lagos, if they see you walking, they might think it's because of poverty. People don't realize and understand that it also has the health value to it. Because that is one of the best way you can actually have the exercise that you need. And a lot of people are actually dropping down because of lack of exercises. And you don't want to walk on Lagos roads because maybe it's the time you are walking on some of the places that has actually been designated for, a walkway. And then one downfall man is running away from a policeman. And then somebody hears a story. So it's a factor of, it's a mix of several factors that we have to begin to talk about. These kinds of conversations are important because I don't even think our global livability or the quality of life of the country itself is one thing that for some people, and it's a good point you made, that rather than take the footbridge, the guy has to run across the express road because he wants to catch, the bus, who never even stops, because as the bus is moving, she's also want to jump in and all that. So there is a whole lot of behavioral aspect of even the real estate management that we have to begin to explore. But anyway, thank you very much for such a delightful presentation. Actually, I met her at a Wimby's event, which is a small world indeed, and she did a fantastic job moderating. So I'm not surprised with this presentation. Thank you very much and welcome one more time. Please, can you put your hand together for Reda? At this point in time, I'm always very excited when I see women taking a lead because a lot of people want to debate or argue that, but that helps us, as a matter of fact, to understand that, like I said earlier on, there are different kinds of values that we are bringing into the mix. I mean, Mr. Odunayo Ajajan mentioned and unveiled a lot of the strategies, especially with the financial or capital allocation investment options that we have, especially in the real estate. I mean, crowdfunding, the whatever it is. No, but people naturally explore that. And I think perhaps Think Mint should look at that particular area as a theme, because without capital, we can't flow in, and we can't even have new Lagos as a matter of fact. And for us to actually help that, we have to also look at the aspect of growth. And ladies and gentlemen, the role of gateway cities in the growth of real estate markets across Africa, a case study of Lagos, Nigeria. And to help us with this particular session, I would like to invite Tosi Ajose. She's the lead advisor of Deal HQ Partners. Please put your hands together for her. Of course, she's a member of the Institute of Directors, and she sits on the board of 3 indigenous Nigerian companies. It's a wonderful thing. I'm not too sure I met you at a Wimbis event as well. No, not at all. Okay, I was mixing. On the panel session, it's not a person. That is a powerful name, sir. What does it mean? Okay. Okay, because it sounds more like property plenty. All right. Thank you. Mentioned the fact that we need such innovation for people to begin to think on how we can empower solutions. I'm excited about this gentleman. He's a gentleman because when I met him at first, we were actually exchanging some conversation. He was the past chairman of a naive Lagos senior consultant at the Bamibola Consulting. A man who understands how integrity works, especially with business engagement, and demonstrated that in his own leadership capacity while he was the chairman of a Naives at Lagos State chapter. And that is the person of Mr. Dotun Bamibola. That one I got right because I know that name is very powerful. Please put your hands together for him. Beautiful thing with people who wear glasses. People, when you wear glasses, you know you are intelligent. So if you don't have glasses, please go see your ophthalmologist. Please do have a seat. And then you knock the bow tie, you know that you are like the MD of African Development Bank, you know. So we're looking forward to a wonderful engagement. I know that this is supposed to be a balanced panel. Enyola Elegushi is supposed to be joining us. You're here? Wonderful, Lord. Please put your hands together for her. Senior Associate of Grail Chapel Legal. And you've been sitting in front of me. This is amazing because I saw you on your phone. Maybe you were trying to settle some case that has COVID. Ladies and gentlemen, section for 40 minutes as the case might be. Tosin, I'm going to be working with you to help me with this. And then, like I said, why is it Lagos, not Ogun State, our official gateway state? Over to you. Please put your hands together for her. She's the moderator of this session.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed an honor to be here today. And thank you to the organizers for inviting me. I have a very interesting panel here today, and we're going to be speaking about the topic, the role of gateway cities in the growth of the real estate markets in Africa. I want to align with the compare that this actually was a topic that should have been curated for Ogun State. And I know that one of the panelists to discuss the subject matter from Mixta sets a very good foundation for us to start this conversation. So looking at Lagos State, a lot of people would say that Lagos is a gateway city, or would say that there are many different communities within Lagos that would qualify as gateway cities of their own right. So just in terms of kicking off the conversation, I will start with Mr. Odushulu. Mr. Odushulu, can you please just help us understand what specific areas of Lagos you think will qualify to be called gateway cities, especially because, I mean, we are blessed in Lagos. We have one of the biggest international airports. We have one of the busiest seaports. We have one of the busiest land borders within the Nigerian system. So what are the specific areas that you think in Lagos will qualify as gateway cities, and why?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Tosi. Let's start with a very simple answer. And this also addresses what the compare was saying. By way of additional information, until 2019, I was managing director of Ogun State Property Investment Corporation, which is the largest state-owned real estate development company in Nigeria. Now, when you talk about Lagos, there are two elements to Lagos. There's what you call the Greater Lagos Axis, and then there's Core Lagos. Core Lagos essentially is a geographic area known as Lagos State, which basically is Lagos mainland and Lagos Island. But the Greater Lagos Axis actually is all the border towns around from Ogun State, which actually surrounds Lagos. If Lagos were a country, Lagos would be the 16th or 17th country in Africa by me. Is the 7th largest economy in Africa. This port, like you rightly said, it's got 6th busiest airport. So what makes Lagos a gateway is the fact that capital actually comes to West Africa. There's nobody who is doing business. In fact, let me be audacious and say there's nobody who's doing business in Africa today, and you haven't started. So let's talk about where are the major cities that you could call the gateway cities. The entire geographic area of Lagos and the surrounding areas of Ijebu-Ode, from once you leave the expressway, that's Ikeja, you drive all the way to the interchange. That entire axis is part of what they call Greater Lagos. That's so what you have is that from, and let me now say this and I'll stop, from the Dangote refinery, there's a road being built that will actually take you to Ondo, an area called Olokola. So literally what you have that is quietly happening that most people don't know is that the boundaries of Lagos have dramatically changed. And the entire stretch of potential landmark that's been opened up is quite huge. And I think that answers it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. At this point, I would like to go to Mr. Dotumba Migbola, just off of what Mr. Odushulu has said, right? So we now kind of are developing in Lagos. As an estate surveyor and valuer, I'm sure that you track, some of the indices around, these developing towns and the ones that have the most potential for return. So just looking at the Lagos demographic, can you the biggest potential for development return for investors, both from?
Well, thank you very much to these events. And I think to answer your question, Mr. Odisholo has actually looked at everything broadly. And we all know, I think it's something that is very clear to everybody, that the gateway city indices, if you look at it, has always been progressive. And right now, the most profitable, so to say, in the Lagos environment is this Lekki Ekpe access because it has a lot of potential for development. So there's always growth there. And even right now, you can see that there are a few changes in terms of the kind of opportunities, particularly in residential real estate that is coming up there, and quite a number of other types of uses of real estate. So this is actually the hub now. And of course, you can also look at the luxury end from the Koyi axis and all that. But this is actually the area now that a lot of people are focusing on.
Like Yepe.
Yes.
So can I ask specifically what your opinion will be on the Badagry axis, especially because of the closeness to the land border, the semi border? Do you think that there is sufficient, development happening in that place, apart from maybe the Agbara industrial estate and maybe the satellite towns and what have you? Is it a paradox that part of Lagos is not really, recording sufficient development? And sorry, not to load you, I also would like us to take a look at the Isheri axis of Lagos. What would you think is the reason also why, there isn't, so much activity happening in that area in terms of real estate development and maybe also infrastructure development?
Okay. The great idea for anybody investing is profits. You're looking for where to make money. And similarly, the developers, they also want to make money in their development projects. Now, one of the drivers and the key drivers of any development, real estate, forget whether it is commercial, residential, or whatever, is infrastructure. Now, that's where the challenge is with Badagry. The Badagry axis is suffering what they said now, that the road was built by Jakonde, probably leading to Ekpe. You have the Jakonde estates around there, around Mobile there. So that was opening up this axis. And definitely everybody was just queuing in over the past 30, 40 years. I mean, development was just queuing in, and that was being expanded over time. You have the movement from VI to Lekki Phase 1, Oniru is there and all that. So with all that, there was a presentation by Mixer that said, look, some people from mainland actually went to Aja. That it's possible that those were the people that, and I think that was it really. So over time, this axis has been evolving, developing. Now, Badagry has a lot of potentials, being a border town, a trade town. But unfortunately, the dearth of infrastructure there, especially the road access, because in this country, in this economy, what we depend more on in terms of our transportation system is the road. And that's why everybody has a car or two or three, and we are not looking at the real transportation system. Even the one that Lagos State government has done has been on for God knows how long now. We have over 16 years. It's not being completed. So,
but it looks like we're getting there now, I think.
Well, we are talking of what has impacted the current situation. And so that is why you have that challenge that, yes, Badagry is not living up to its potential. For the good that Agbara Industrial Estate has done, we should have gone beyond that. We shouldn't be talking of Agbara Industrial Estate now. We should be talking of other industrial estates along that axis.
Thank you very much, sir. Let me go to you, Eniola. I think the moderator has sold you out as one of the bourgeoisies in our midst. So I'm going to just go quickly and ask you. I know that you do advisory work in this space. So from what we're hearing, a lot of developers, take investment decisions to locate projects in some of these gateway cities that they feel that, have clear indices of potentials in terms of, development, returns, and all the like. But one of the things that, clearly, belabels some of these decisions is the fact that when you are coming in to start development in new towns, you have to factor in the cost of developing the infrastructure yourself. Many times when you get there, there isn't anything, right? So this has been a major challenge for these areas and the developments. And sometimes, even if it is an environment where you are revamping, you know, an already existing community, many times you have to upgrade, you know, the infrastructure that is there, right? So what do you think that this does to affordability and the profit play at the end of the day? Because at the end of the day, whatever it costs the developer to make the community livable is passed on to, you know, the parties who want to, you know, actually live or work or play in those communities.
Thank you very much for the question, and thank you for having me. As you've rightly said, when the cost of development is excessive, the excess cost, so to speak, is passed on to the investors, to the consumers. However, would advise that the developer, prior to commencing the project, should plan adequately. There are tax incentives available for developers who want to perhaps put infrastructure in place. You realize that you want to commence a project, the roads are not motorable, there's no water, there are no water facilities, etc. You have to, as the first step, plan your project. There are several ways of going around this. One, you can apply for a tax incentive. I know the Finance Act 2020 gives some incentives to real estate companies. Your dividend and rental income would not be subject to tax. So, bearing this in mind, the cost of development can be reduced. Also, you can enter into a joint venture with a landowner. You can reduce the cost of development rather than you bearing the total cost of development. Enter into a joint venture. You have a landowner who would like to commence a project with you. You can decide on the cost that you would bear as an individual or as a company, and then the landowner would also bear some costs. By doing that, the cost of development is reduced. Also, there's the tax holidays given by the government. I'm aware that Dangote typically, prior to commencing the project, would put certain infrastructure in place. Land, for example, the area will be developed. Roads there'll be motorable roads. There'll be electricity, water supply. After the project has been completed, yes, you can apply for tax holiday, so that for a certain number of years, you're not going to be subject to tax as a company.
I'm sure a lot of developers here will take you up on those. Yes. And, you know, so quickly, right, based on, you know, some of these things that you have said, I would just like to know, but do you actually think that if there's been a pass on of those costs, you know, to the potential buyers or the consumers, do you really think that the developers are really deserving of these tax benefits ultimately? Or do you think that we need to start thinking creatively of ways to ensure that those benefits can actually, you know, cascade down to the people that are actually bearing, you know, that burden ultimately?
So I'm certain that the government would you won't just approach the government and say, I need a tax holiday because I bought this amount of cost. They would look into your project, they'll look into how you structured it, how much cost has been passed on to the consumers. And they'll decide on whether or not you're actually worthy of getting such incentives. So despite the fact that the costs have been passed on to the consumers, you may still be eligible for such incentives. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Eniola. Yes, sir, please.
Just to contribute to what Eniola was saying, I think one of the fundamental things, especially for most developers, and goes back to what Odo and I were talking about earlier on, is when you're going to open up a new city, it's a large capital cost. I mean, we're talking about Badagry. For example, Ecostone did a massive project in Badagry, and they applied for tax concessions, and they were denied. Of course, government tried to couch it any which number of ways, but they were denied. And for me, what I say to most of my colleague developers is we've got to change our paradigm. Today, if I'm going to do a new project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a syndication. First step, I'm going to do a syndication. I'm going to get in making my planning approval request. I'm actually going to do a pitch to whatever the government, whether it's Ogun State or Lagos State, that's going to get me a lot of concessions on the cost of infrastructure. See, because one of the mistakes people make about this development is that there's some costs you can't pass on to your subscribers because they're capital costs. They're huge costs. If I were to try and price in the cost of, for example, creating an IPP to people that buy property from me, those properties will be unaffordable. I mean, most people would not be able to afford them because the purchase cost will be high. So the easier thing for me to probably do would be to syndicate and create a model around my IPP that commercializes it, that ensures that in the longer term, it can also pay for itself. And most of our frontier cities require those kind of arrangements. Whether you're doing waterworks, you're doing road work, you're doing power, you've got to find a way of being able to create a financial model that ensures that it can pay for itself in the longer term.
Thank you very much. This is
Thank you very much. I apologize.
Okay,
Just
sorry,
to
Aniela.
piggyback on what Mr. Odusholu has said. The interesting thing is when these developments are put in place by developers, the developments might actually be more profitable because I don't see why you should embark on the project without ensuring that certain infrastructure are in place. So as a first step, as you said, syndication, plan appropriately. Don't just delve into a project and say, okay, here's Badagry, I want to commence a development. No, take a step back, plan, ensure that certain things are in place. You need to apply for those tax incentives that I mentioned, apply for them prior to commencing your project. That's the only way to be profitable and not to pass the
to see the comfort of the patient and at the same time see the cost benefit analysis to the hospital. So you do a walkthrough. So while I was doing that walkthrough at the landmark center, and I was saying, no, we can't have this here. No, this has to go there. Because we're also very concerned about our HVAC, the indoor air quality. And the person felt I was disturbing his, that's what I put it, disturbing his vibe. That, why am I moving things around? And then the architect said, well, from what I know of her, if she says it's going to move, it's going to move. And so all of a sudden, as a facilities manager, you are all of a sudden at the table. You might not have been able to get yourself to the table, but COVID has brought you to the table. So you need to use it properly. You need to read, you need to study. You need to, one of the efficiencies, you need to educate your mind. We need to get to the place where we're using our education, our experiences to save money. Little effort. Remember the definition of efficiencies. Because if I ask some facility managers here whether they have an understanding of OSHA or NABOSH, or it will be interesting to see, sir, where that policy you spoke about that was written. It is an interesting publication for every real estate person to know, to have. Educate yourself, know where your fire hydrants are. Know what is the fire capacity or the doors you're using. Because, for example, there are doors where if you have an emergency here, and this is an enclosed space, your doors must be such that can retain the flame away for a certain period to allow you to escape through whatever escape tube you have. Do you have suppressions between your walls? All these things, you might not have it, but you can be educated about it so that even when your organization is proposing a renovation, a refit, a new build, you are doing a presentation and all of a sudden you are helping them reduce numbers. The bottom line is looking good because you, the facilities manager, the real estate consultant, you have educated yourself. You don't always have to get about a certificate, but you need to be informed. Now, the more the world is getting that we use in our baby unit. I was like, He said, no, you grammar, you know, well, I was thinking, oh my goodness, is that the time? We need to go for lunch. Guys, can we go for lunch? And that was how I escaped it. But because they were particular about standards. All the things the fire officer said has to do with standards. We are poor followers of standards. Even when we know the standards, we do not follow. Our rate of impunity is unbelievable. Now, unfortunately, COVID is setting a new standard post-COVID for the world. It's as if, you know, we had all of this and we press restart. So we seem all of us are starting from the same page. We expect that the way you would deal with somebody who is in other climes is the way you're going to be dealing here. The third and last efficiency I want to speak about before we go on is, which most people think is synonymous with facilities management. But the reason I picked the two efficiencies first was because if you, the person, you're not right, this isn't going to work. That was important for you to understand that it's not going to be business as usual anymore. You need to educate yourself. You need to understand that you can use efficiencies. You can use learning, education to improve and reduce and do things cheaper at a better client. So this, for a lot of people, is the heart of real estate. Earlier on, Odun spoke about Proptech. So all of a sudden, you know, people try to do fancy Proptech, and everybody's just going crazy all over Proptech. And you're not understanding that even your basic Microsoft Office is the most basic Proptech. Because before you start saying, okay, you want to go and get a facilities management app, you know, some of us are not as big as AlphaMate that have their own app, or, you know, a few more. So you want to use a facility management app. You want to be able to take a record of even your tenancies, or you want to know some of your periodic maintenance schedule. You can start with an Excel sheet. You can start with your calendar, Google Calendar. It will help. But thinking that until I need to throw money at the problem, that's not efficient. You buying a big software that you hardly use. It's like most of us that buy all of these fancy phones. We don't even use up to 15% of the efficiencies of that phone. So it's like being stupid with your finances. So the same thing before you start reaching out for those big techie apps. Let's even start with the basic Microsoft Office. I don't know how many people here, if you have an apartment, a tenanted apartment that has about 150 buildings, and you needed to send one letter, that same letter with the same, that you can send it to 150 people. In Microsoft, what do you use? Excel. Really interesting. Anyone going else? Going? Yes, sir. Thank you. A lot of people don't know how to mail merge. They don't even know what it means. It's right there on Microsoft. It's been there. I've been using mail merge since 1996. A lot of people don't know what mail merge is. Then you'll be typing the same letter, be changing the address, and you continue doing that, even down to the content of the letter. Do you know with mail merge, it is possible for you to send a rent renewal notice to 150 people, 1,000 people, with different renewal dates, with different addresses, by the click of a button, just with Excel and your database and you mail merge. A lot of us can't even do that now, and we want to go pick up a fancy tech. So even right at your fingertips, your Microsoft Word can help you improve. And then the idea of automating. There's so many things that we can automate that we don't need to use people. That is the way we reduce waste and we increase efficiencies in our facility management service. And for tech, I just put that there. I said, love it, don't accommodate it. If you just accommodate it, you will never be able to stretch the extent of your mind. But you need to know that it's part of working. Now, technologies like, for those in real estate brokerage, like augmented reality, virtual reality. Your client was if you take, let me give an example of Rightmove UK. Is a real estate website on. If you look there now, most regular real estate agents, now they have videos of their properties. So with COVID, I don't need to go do any inspections. We also even know the security implication of inspections nowadays. We've heard stories of the man who went inspecting and was killed. So if you are serious about the business, send me a video. Let me be able to do a virtual reality walk through that video or that property with the coordinates so that I can know it exists and it's real. If your client is trying to think, okay, I don't have money yet to do all these designs, you can do an augmented reality, AR, and show him what can be. So we have to lobby it enough to see it as a problem solver for us. And then there are things like BMI. BMI is changing information modeling of properties. It's changing real estate as it is. So even before you put the first block on the site, you can actually have an understanding of how your building interacts with everything inside. And there's Internet of Things. You know how Nigerians, we like fancy things. All of a sudden people are telling you we are doing smart developments, smart flats. And you want to sell smart flat to somebody who interconnectivity is even a problem. You know how you buy, if you buy, what do you call it now? If you buy 9 Mobile, before you say Jack Robinson, the data is finished. So is it really, so the thing is so fast, it's unbelievable. So you need to think, is smart buildings for everybody? And if it is for everybody, how can you make it cheaper? Because it seems to be the way other climes are going, but we need to not throw money at technology. It must be adaptable to the environment, to the reality of Nigeria. So those are ways technology is helping to improve facility management. In an health-conscious environment, every one of us has a responsibility as facilities manager, as real estate consultants, to pay attention to the health issues. In planning, do you have exits? Is the exit through the toilet? All of a sudden, it's extremely important, I repeat it again, for you to get that policy paper that the officers were about the health and safety. Health and safety is now going to be the key to developing, even managing any property right now, because you don't know what's on the other bend. It is COVID today. We don't know what's going to happen next. But is your building ready? Are your occupants ready? Are you ready to face whatever it is that is going to come at the end of the curve? So that means you always have to be in front of it. A lot of us have gadgets. I put this thing as the last one. We have all of these things. Half of us don't know what we use it for. We just put it so that people will see you as busy and techie. So we need to get ahead of technology. Don't buy it for the sake of buying it. Because the cost of buying an FM software is not easy. It's not funny. It's not an average estate surveyor or real estate person can afford it here. But let's start with the simple one. Sometimes things don't have to be sophisticated for it to work. So even efficiency, simplicity is efficient. So I want you to consider that in there where you're putting your papers together. And as I round up, this for me would be the way to just close. And when we are talking about efficiencies, I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to be wasteful of anything, of any moment. I don't want to stay in places that drain me. For what? I don't want to keep up with people who don't offer growth or positivity. Maybe I'm selfish. That's okay. But I want to bring value and get value. I don't want to waste food, energy, time, or my life in any way possible. So as we talk about efficiencies, not just about ourselves, our environment, but even our nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Akure. So whichever, maybe you sit there, I think Mr. Ayo actually has created the standard for that. Your presentation is very important, and this is some of the things I always say. I've had the privilege of anchoring different kinds of events. Like I always tell people, this is what I do for a living. I love what I do. I'm passionate about that. But one of the things I've oftentimes realized in most events is that there is a lack of exploring the social or sociological aspect of any grammar we speak in a given conference. Because at the end of the day, you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with etiquette, you're dealing with values and the rest of that. I mean, if you and I are walking somewhere and you see an old friend who said, it's that same hand I want to shake you with. I just tell you, my brother, keep your hand. You know, as simple as that, you know, and sometimes people don't seem to realize that that is important, because if you fall sick, it's going to put pressure on the health facilities, which, by the way, is not even enough in Nigeria. And so some of this hygiene, some of this, and thank God for COVID, even though it's a plus or minus as the case is. At this point, we're going to be dealing with a plenary session titled Data Centers, Logistics Parks, and Emerging Leaders in the Demand for Space. And interestingly enough, she has actually served as the Chief Executive Officer of a social enterprise, which is the Pro Support Services Limited. So I can imagine that some of this can also come to bear, especially in the real estate sector. And I'd like to also invite to join her Mr. Timi Adesanya, pardon me, Mr. Timi Adesanya, Commercial Manager, Agility Logistics, who is going to be joining us on this panel session. Is he here? If not, you are here. Wonderful. Please put your hands together for him. Some of you have no survey. Where is he, please? I know he's in the house. I met him.
Stores are increasingly turning to alternative real estate to take prospects and to their portfolio. So the two areas that we want to look at, we're looking at data centers and logistic parks and the emerging leaders in this demand for space. But go beyond this big grammar. I just like to ask you, teaching it to a kid, they said if you can't teach it to a kid, then you don't really know what you're dealing with. Teaching it to a kid, can you just tell me when you talk data centers, what are we talking about?
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the organizers for having us in this panel session. To answer directly the way you have asked it, teaching it to a kid, we're moving into a time where a lot of what we're doing is being controlled by technology. And as a result of that, there now becomes a requirement to store a lot of the things that we're doing. So if I'm trying to take this to a kid, so I would say you have your Gmail account or your Google account, right? And your information that you have on your email is stored somewhere, right? You can't see it, you don't even know where it is. And so the bunch of networks that controls how that system, like the backbone of that system, is stored in places called data centers. So all our internet providers, Google, Amazon, and what we now call cloud-based solutions is stored in places called data centers. So to give some context, it means everything that we're using for whatever we're using now as a network and all of that, we could be using in a data center stored somewhere in South Africa, somewhere in Europe. It makes technology almost without geographical limits. So, for example, the data centers we have in Nigeria presently are currently being run by people who are not based in Nigeria. So the majority of the uptake of our data center space is actually by foreign companies. So it makes the world a much smaller place and really creates the connectivity. So for a child, I would say a data center is where all of our data, which is now going into a cloud-based system, is stored. So if I'm an organization, my whole accounting system could be cloud-based, where I don't have any physical server in my office, but I can log in anywhere in the world. I can do my transactions. I can check what is going on. All of that is now cloud-based, and they are stored in data centers all over the world. And the meaning of that is, as technology begins to improve and we go more and more in that direction, the need for these data centers begins to increase. And the thing about the technology, as great as it is that the closer you are to the data center, in technological terms, the less the latency. So the faster, the better the speed. So everybody's trying to get as close as possible to where the service is being used, which is why now in Africa and Nigeria, we're seeing an advent of the need to have data center in close proximity to where the technology is being used. I hope that gives some.
To a child, yes. To me, the child here, it's.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Now, to me, I just want to throw that in this way. You know, I normally sometimes tease you and call you Mr. Agility. So I want you to speak to us before we even, you've taken a bit of the other questions I was going to ask about the strength of it, but I'm still going to come back there.
Okay.
To the issue of the logistics park. Something before you used to hear about, they'll say the fathers I've ever heard before when we were trying to call the trailer parks and all of a sudden. But then when I started interacting with you and your move to agility, you know, the conversations about logistic park became into. So could you talk to us about logistic parks and what does it really mean? Because sometimes you can be having a conversation and the person just nodding their head and after what you said, they don't really get it. So please let us get it, like I said, from a child's perspective.
Okay, thank you, Jamaica, for the question. Thank you for inviting me to this panel session. So again, I'll piggyback off explaining it to a child. What is a logistic or a warehouse park? And if you think back to 5-6 years ago, when the office market was just booming and the good people at Actis and the good people at R&B Westport were building the wings and the Heritage Place office complexes. Those are grade A office buildings. So a logistics park is essentially a grade A warehouse, essentially. For example, a data center is a tenant in a logistic park because these logistics park provide international standard warehousing for everybody from SMEs all the way to multinational companies and everybody in between. So I'll give you an example. One of our customers in Ghana is a homegrown Ghanaian company that packages Ghanaian food as simple as gari, cassava, and those kind of things, and then packages them together, exports them out of the country, makes their money. They started from 500 square meters and they've ramped up to over 5,000 square meters now. That's an SME. A multinational company, such as a data center, can come in there and require a specialized warehouse that requires specific temperature settings for the equipment that they're going to have in there, specific floor to ceiling heights, specific dock heights. That level of complexity is also what you can have in a logistic park. So everything that you want to do from basic storage all the way to data centers, all the way to pharmaceutical companies, all the way to cold storage, all the way to specific industrial requirements. This is what a logistics park provides you.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Timmy. Now, I wanted us to run the rest of the questions on like on a SWOT analysis basis, right? But I would not say SWOT. I want to make it like my own. I'm changing the SWOT. I want to put the O after the T. So instead of having SWOT, I want to have SWTO because I want to leave the opportunities at the end of it so that people can really relate to it eventually. So to start with the strength, you know, the numbers are saying diversification into this industry is, I mean, it's tripled, is rising, but it can't be just about COVID because I know Agility has been here way before COVID started. Mm-hmm. So if I were to start again from you before I go to software, what would say is it that, what are the numbers? What is it that is making this to all of a sudden be a very interesting business for people to be getting into? I mean, you're doing about 500,000 square meters.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify the point, we build warehouses at a large scale. Each site will have 500,000 square meters, which is what, 50 hectares of land, of which we will build about 280,000 square meters of warehousing. And for those in the know, you will agree with me that as it sits, will largely be the biggest warehouse park you will see anywhere in Nigeria. And the reason why that is because, to your point, even before COVID hit, the demand was always there. And when COVID hit, the demand became even more significant and important because people couldn't go to work, unfortunately. People couldn't go to malls, unfortunately. But people were sat at home and were on their phones and were clicking and buying and doing things. So businesses were still moving. The logistics bikes were still considered as essential services. So they needed to get things from A to B. All of these things needed to be stored in a warehouse. Even if you were not buying anything, just sat at home, clicking on your Instagram, on your Snapchat or whatever, the data center is providing you with that information and that access to be able to do what it is that you want while you're sat at home. So the demand is there and the demand is growing. We currently sit on over 200,000 square meters of demand that we're unable to meet. Right now, we should be launching the 100,000 square meters of this warehousing this time next year. And the plan for Agility over the next 5 years is that we expect to build 5 of these across Nigeria. And Nigeria being obviously the largest economy in Africa, we see a network that we can achieve by starting this in Ghana, where we've built. We've moved to Maputo, we've moved to Ivory Coast, and now we're in Lagos, but we also have interest in Togo, in Kenya. And the idea is to have a network of these logistics parks that will meet the demand that we obviously see there. And if you then touch on the fact that the AFCFTA is making the entire African continent just one huge marketplace, that feeds into our entire business concept of having this network across the entire continent.
Okay, thanks. I still want to ask that question, but I don't know whether if there was one, whether there was one hurrah moment. Was there something that really all of a sudden got those numbers going high? I mean, when you're saying that these alternative sectors are even tripling in value, was there something? I don't want to use COVID, because I know that for some people, like even the tech experts of this world that do outsourcing, they were all here before COVID. In fact, there's a joke where a young man called from America and he didn't realize that the person he was talking to at the center was in Nigeria. So I think when he heard the person's name, he said he was complaining about something to do with his Google service or something. And then I think when he realized, because I think my brother was the one who was supervisor on duty, he said, no, wait, wait. You mean is this Lagos? I'm talking to you in Lagos. I have back, babe, forget what is the problem. You mean Nigeria is moving like this? The guy started chatting about back home. He was excited. He didn't even remember what the problem was. So they've been here before COVID. So I want to ask, was there like some break, some historical points at which all of a sudden these numbers kept going on? Or was it that it was a progressive thing that we didn't notice and those people like Agility saw it before an average person saw it, even the data centers? What was it really that got us on this ramp?
So I think it has been going on quietly. It almost, I mean, COVID just made it more obvious. It was always going to happen this way. So if we, divided data centers and then the logistics parks, which sort of encapsulates data parks centers. Starting with data centers. For many years, when you call a call center, maybe you're in the UK, for example, and you call a call center for any service that you're using, your telephone line, the people who are speaking to you are speaking in India, right? And I used to work in one of these outsourced call centers in the UK. And the people that part of our team were based in India. And there will be times when they would come from India for training and acclimatization to the environment, so that when you call someone and then, you want to have a local connection with the person. So the person, even though he's speaking to you from India, he's saying, oh, how was the premiership? What team do you support? So this trend has been going on for years all over the world. And I think what is happening now that we're seeing is that it is now becoming obvious that, hold on, why is this not happening in Nigeria? Why is this not happening in Africa? What are the advantages that India and the rest of them have that we don't have? Because what all these data centers are outsourcing. They look for places where English is, a first language or an easy language. They look for where there's technology. One of the banes we've always had has been things like power and some of those other things. And people have just discovered that, look, we can make this thing work. If telecoms has been able to work one way or the other, then all these other services like data centers, there's no point using power as an excuse. It can work. And, with people are always looking for new frontiers. So India is saturated. The world is looking for the next place to move, and Africa provides a perfect opportunity for data centers. The same thing with logistics parks. Now the whole of Africa is going to soon become like one country. And that means things need to be able to move, right? Of course, there are many other things when you come to your SWOT analysis about what the things that need to be in place for this to work. But it means that I have a friend who produces fruits, fresh fruits in Ghana, right? And they produce in Ghana, they have a park very close to the airport. And some of the fresh fruits that you consume in Waitrose or in Tesco in the morning were plucked 48 hours ago in Ghana. So these things are already with us. We just need to, if that can happen all the way from Ghana to Europe, what is stopping it from happening from Nigeria to Ivory Coast, from Nigeria to Ghana, from Nigeria, even as far as Maputo or South Africa? We just need to think outside the box. And one of the things that is happening now is that a lot of when you see donors begin to pump money into something that represents a country, for example, you say it has been pumping money into this chain for years, trying to see how they can connect the whole of the West African belt, even the whole of Nigeria, and see all the connection points. So they've been pumping donor money. In fact, there is a lot of research that they have paid for already that is just requiring some business people to take it up and turn it into a business. Of course, funding needs to go into it, but these things have been with us for a long time. COVID have just made it become very obvious.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I just a word to the audience as they listen, is that I want you to please see it for what it is. Business opportunities different from the norm. And so we're asking questions even in our mind, even when we leave here, we continue the conversations about how we can also tap into this space. It's not for only the agilities of this world or the big enterprises. Some of us have empty properties, and commercial real estate is effective occupation is getting maybe little every little day. And so all of a sudden you need to ask your questions. Can you adapt them to fit into some of these narratives that has been spoken about here? So just let us see it as three people having a conversation. I want you to bring yourself into the space and see what you can take away from it to be as alternatives of emerging into this new market as it begins to spread, or even being allied, stakeholders supporting this business, even if you're not doing the main. There are different services attached to this warehousing or even data centers that one can tap into as real estate people. And so I just want us to, put that cap on as we're going through this session. Thank you. So now let me ask about the Achilles heel. To speak actually about the opportunity, when you said, they're coming to Nigeria, I remember sometimes when the VP was saying that Nigeria happens to be the only country without a toneless accent. And it's only Nigerians, if speaking properly, you cannot tell where they're from when they're speaking English. Forget the native Yoruba or, those Obongidi ones, not those ones. I'm not talking about those ones. I'm saying that when you see people speaking, but if an Indian is speaking, you would know. Yeah. So all of a sudden, that barrier of trying to acclimatize really reduces because the person already gives you an idea that you're speaking to someone who is in England anyway. So that means that we are really a very rich market for that business. That's one of the opportunities. And you find people even cropping those kind of people that will serve those markets. So Timmy, let me ask you, beautiful as it sounds, the 100,000 square meters and all of that, but there's an Achilles heel here somewhere. What is it?
So my contract with the company will allow me to reveal that. But generally. But first and foremost, to the point you made before I answer your question, nothing will ever beat local market knowledge. It's actually impossible. The person that knows the market, understands it, has been here, boots on ground, understands everything, can speak the lingo, can do absolutely everything, nothing will ever beat that person. And As I say that, my boss here looks at me and says, it's true, because I'm a testament of that. Everywhere I've worked, the biggest selling point I've always had is, do you know the market? And the answer is yes. To answer your question, of course, there'll be threats and weaknesses. The biggest threat that we see or weakness that we see is the economy. Whether you like it or not, as great as your product is, if the economy is tanking, nobody is going to buy your product. Look at Venezuela, hyperinflation. Whatever product you have in there will have a problem eventually if people cannot buy, if demand cannot meet supply. That will be a problem. Now, we in the decades of research that we've done before releasing our product into the market, I've tried as much as possible to mitigate against this. I would say we've been very, very successful. The occupancy rates and the take-up ratio that we've experienced in other markets that we've launched before Nigeria is testament to that. The numbers that we are seeing here in Nigeria completely blow our mind. And there's a running joke in the office where everyone knows that once Nigeria opens, no one will care about the other markets, because the sum total of the demand or the take-up that we've done in three countries that we've opened up does not compare to what we can achieve in one park in Nigeria. So again, that fits into the demand and the economics of it. So if there's one weakness, I would say that's it. If we can get our act together and allow our quote unquote burgeoning middle class actually burgeon and do their thing and grow and innovate and be supported, then everything will grow. I mean, I have a friend who runs a bike company. She calls herself a logistics company. I say, we are primarily a bike company, because she started with 2, 3, 4 bikes, and now she has over 150. What does she do? She just delivers your products from here to there. But if you think about it in detail, do you know how many small scale companies are in Lekki first to third roundabouts that are either selling shawarma or selling small chops or selling clothes or selling shoes, and they just need someone to be able to fulfill that order from point A to point B 10 times a day per company? Let's assume there are 100 companies like that, and I assure you there are 10 times more than that. Run the numbers and you see the opportunity within first to third roundabout alone. How much more the mainland, which I advocate for, everybody seems to forget. The spending power there, huge spending power. But just the economies that we have, the macros that we see in Nigeria, just makes it impossible to ignore the possibilities that can be achieved here. And I think, to your point, it's only a matter of time. I don't know who started the trend in the office market. It's only a matter of time before there's another agility, and an agility then third person, and a fourth person, and a fifth person that will come and meet the demand. And like Mr. Ojo said, the unfortunate thing about real estate is that it takes time. So people have seen agility bite the bullet now, and we're doing what we're doing, and they're sitting and saying, maybe we missed a trick here. Let's get into it. I read an article yesterday that says investors in Kenya are actively seeking warehouse development opportunities because they realize that the retail market is tapped out, the leisure market is tapped out, the grade office space is tapped out. Where's the next frontier? Like you said, and you can't go and build grade offices in Santin or whatever. Forget about it, it's done. What's the next thing to do? And Africa, Nigeria specifically, is the final frontier.
Oh, final frontier. Thank you, Jimmy. Let me ask, okay, so you have the agilities, the big boys, as they say, but you also have the challenges where you talk about the way our economy is. I mean, that's the one that's tanking for Timmy from his own perspective. But how can that, and you also have us saying, deal local, buy local, do local, because the more we strengthen our local industry, the better economics gets and all of that. So, but how do you, or how can you use, so now I just want to put the weakness with the strength. Say, how can you use these two identified line segments that we're talking about? How can you use it to strengthen the local industry? Because we might not have a 200,000 square meter space, but you can, I mean, just for example, look at just what you mentioned about the first to the third roundabout. What kind of opportunities would you ask people to be applying their minds to see how you can use that to even improve the business of the day?
So I'll start with the logistics parks because it's pretty obvious. So now the likes of Agility are building these parks, right? But the thing about every logistic park, every warehouse space is that whatever is in there needs to get there and needs to live there, right? So you could start coming up with solutions around things that they need to move things out of those places. Trucking, cold storage. So cold trucks. I have a friend who is doing that already. You know, how you can, you know, you can't actually find maybe more than 2 or 3 companies that can move something in a refrigerated form from Lagos to Abuja without the items getting, you know, damaged on the way. But those are opportunities that having this sort of storage spaces, this sort of logistics parks begins to create. So you don't need to be the one to build the park, but you can own one truck. And just like your friend started with 2 bikes, you start with 2 trucks, and before you know it, you now have 150 moving things around the country. What people need, just like in the bike space, is reliability. You know, you take it up a notch, you create the quality that people are not seeing. And someone is doing that already, using technology to aid logistics. A number of people are doing that already. So you can just pick your own niche in that space. You don't have to serve the entire country to start with. You can serve Lagos. Lagos alone is like a country on its own. You can serve the corridors from Lagos heading into Ogun State. You can serve Lagos heading towards the east, going through Ondo State, going through Ogun, through Shagamu. There are some logistics parks in Ore. Ore is a hub where is historical, because from Ore you can go to the southwest, you can go to the southeast. So you can, and there's already, I know people who are building smaller size. They can't build 200,000 square meters, but they can build a hectare, doing something, you know. So everybody moving their products from the places around Ore, you can get it to the north and every part of the country. So you begin to think transportation links, cold storage, moving things efficiently. Of course, all of this is then tied back to all the normal challenges. The roads are not great, but we still have to do business. So you just have to overlook all of those things and get on with it. And so you do your part as the private sector because you're a business person. You identify the opportunities. You see which part of the weaknesses you can sort out yourselves. And the ones that you can't, you let it be and do your business regardless. So those are some of the areas. Then, of course, in the area of data centers, now, the data centers we have in Nigeria presently, according to the data, is only 30% utilized presently by local demand. That means there's a heavy underutilization. So tech companies, all the tech companies coming up with solutions, the Octo 5s, where are they hosting this? They don't need to go far. They don't need to go and host this in California, where we have data centers now locally. Of course, we are getting, the data centers are growing, and these data centers have global standards. So if you see a data center that is tier 3, it is the same standard you have in a data center tier 3 in Nigeria that you have in a data center tier 3 in New York. So you can be sure that the standard of service that you're expecting once it is certified is going to be the same. So all our tech guys can begin to look at things that they can host to the cloud, and then they can begin to take advantage of the local data centers for that purpose.
Thanks, okay. So when can you make a case for, if you say there's only 30% occupation now, can you make a case, because maybe like an average business person, unless if you're in tech, most people do not understand the importance of a data center to their business. So what's the unique, selling advantage? Why should, I mean, we're surrounded in Nigeria by so many SME. I mean, we're told that is actually the fulcrum of our economy in Nigeria, but a lot of them are not taking that because they don't see themselves as a tech company. So what is it that you would say that could become like a mantra that one can sell to the businessman or to say, look, with the amount of business you're doing, you should be able to tap into some of these data centers?
So the thing about data centers, technology, and all of that is that to the average person, it still sounds far away. So there's a lot of work for technology companies to do to make you feel just like the dream that Bill Gates and Steve Jobs had. You know, people thought computers used to be big mainframes. It used to be, you know, and then somebody thought, no, everybody can have it in their houses. And then now everybody has either a laptop, a system, or something on your phone. It is that vision. So the technology community in Nigeria has a lot of work to do to make people feel familiar with technology, make you feel like it's supposed to be second nature, right? I was in the UK a few weeks ago, and I went to a barbering shop, and you know, the guy is a personal inside the barbering salon. Everybody that owns a chair is their own business, even though they are renting the space. So I finished, and I didn't have any cash. I said, no, don't worry. And he brought out his phone and some gadget, and he just told me to put my card on it, connected with this one, and you know, he got paid, right? So these things are already happening. So our local business, that means technology has become so familiar, right? You don't feel it's alien to you. So our local technology companies need to make you feel that, you know, technology should be a part of your normal day-to-day life. And one of the ways to do that is to take advantage of the phone. Almost everybody has a phone. Phones are everywhere. If you can leverage on that, then people begin to feel comfortable with it, and then you begin to sell it that, look, technology is not that far. It doesn't need to be that expensive. Those are the things that people complain about. Or is it going to cost me so much? You know, there are still people in Nigeria today that don't have ATM cards because they're afraid somebody's going to steal their money. So there's still a lot of orientation that needs to go into, even before businesses start taking it up, the technology businesses need to become likable. They need to become approachable. They need to become friendly. People need to see technology like driving a car. You know, there was a time people used to ride donkeys, and then people ride cars now. It's normal, right? Very soon, electric vehicles are going to be normal. The same way, we need our technology companies to drive the narrative that technology is normal. You have a phone, it is secure. Your money is not going anywhere. It's going to make your life easier, make your business transparent. You can be anywhere in the world, and your business, you'll still be able to run your business. So I think that's the first thing. And then, of course, for the business people who are already exposed, it is obvious. Technology makes your business more efficient. It makes it more effective. It makes it easier to access. And it creates, it removes limits, right? You don't have to be physically there to get things done. Those advantages should be things that every business owner should be looking to incorporate into their business.
Thank you very much, Opa, for that exhaustive one. Now, I want to just to round it up with the opportunities. You know, I said I was going to leave that for last. But I again, to speak to the audience, to say, you know, in real estate, they'll say, land is everything into, I forgot that Latin phrase that we use in school. Yes, in school that says, are you sure? I'm not following to that part because I'm not sure. That is everything on land is to the uttermost sky. It's okay, you were correct, Timmy. Say it again.
Isn't it quick with solo steady plantator or something like that?
It's obviously the people listening in class. Means so it's not just about buying, it's not brokerage. We're not talking brokerage as real estate consultants. We're talking real estate, everything on land, into the utmost part of the sky and into the deepest part of the earth. So you're on land, is warehousing, is data. I want us to see into it as, you know, being stakeholders in it and begin to plan beyond now. Because in all honesty, the real estate space of, you've heard people speak here about, you know, residential, we talked a lot, and you're bidding 100,000 here, 100,000 there. To be honest, how many people are really buying these properties? Meanwhile, there's so many other frontiers that are opening up that we can take advantage of. You've got clientele who have land and is sitting down in Ogun State, Shagamu somewhere. Now meet Mr. Timmy now and begin to see if you can wrap up a relationship. And maybe with second level, because I remember someone, Valentino said a joke. Well, it sounded insultive anyway then. He said people wanted his brand, but not everybody can afford this brand. So he started a smaller brand, a cheaper brand, named it after his dog. But yeah, but it was a brand people could afford. So maybe Agility could have Agility Less Pro or something. Or someone else could come up with other thing, you know, datum serve, whatever it is. But that's that's light, but we can take advantage of that. So I want us to speak to that about the opportunities, not speaking to outside, even speaking for the real estate consultants and stakeholders that are here. What are the opportunities for people in real estate, consultants, whether with their clients or even other for themselves in this aspect of logistic parks, data centers? So can I ask Timmy, can you run over that?
Okay. I think the easiest opportunity I can give anyone in the warehousing space is Agility is a large-scale developer. We are the largest industrial and warehouse developer in Africa. The minimum development we do is 270,000 square meters, minimum. But there's a gap in there because there's so many last mile requirements that we can't meet. So Agility will have a warehouse on Lagos Ibadan Expressway, and maybe on the Ijebu Ode Expressway, and maybe Benin Ore Expressway, that will enable that, inter-Nigeria distribution or intra-Nigeria distribution. But these goods, like you mentioned, leave Agility's warehouse and go into a last mile warehouse that could only be 1,000, 2,000 square meters in size. Agility is never going to own that, but somebody still has that requirement. That's one opportunity. I'll give you an example. I won't mention the company's name, but they came into the country and they had the brands that they had in other countries. But when they came into the country, they realized that this is not the market for that. This is a mass market country. And they started making what they were making in sachets. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. They didn't bring the things that they did over there here and try to force it down people's throats. They made it into sachets and they will never leave this country because they're making way too much money. Same thing happened with people in telecoms. The packages they were offering in other countries were not the same. Then they moved to what? Per second billing and whatnot, and small data packages and whatnot, and they're making a fortune. You have to tailor the requirement to what the market needs. Forget about it. As long as a baby is being born every how many seconds in Nigeria and our population is exploding the way it's exploding, the opportunities will always be there. And in fact, the opportunities will continue to be more and more and more. So that's one example in the logistics space. Agility we will never buy a 5,000 square meter land and build 2,000 square meters of warehousing. It's not going to happen. Like you mentioned, someone can have one cold refrigeration truck and say, okay, you know what? These guys are here. They need to transport the milk, the chocolates, the perishable foods from here to there. Let me take up the opportunity. I have a partner who told me that 40% of his produce, when he's bringing it down from the north to the east to end market Lagos, is lost in spoilage, just because he doesn't have the facility like you mentioned. Even if it's not a cold truck, the warehouse is going to go into, even as a stopgap, cannot keep it fresh. And that is a need. That is a huge need. And the guy has told me, look, it is a no-brainer. Whatever amount of money you want, I will pay. Just because you are meeting my
will I say, assets or part of the accessories that every developer, even if it's a landlord who is renting out an apartment or a flat, should basically provide for the benefit of the occupant?
To what it would cost if there is a loss in terms of the building. It's not comparable at all. So first and foremost, we would encourage as much as possible, go for the optimum. Don't plan around, okay, let me just get a fire extinguisher and so on and so forth. That go for the optimum. Yes, fire extinguishers are also important, but what usually happens is that they are recommended in addition to these fire protection measures. So that's how it works. The fire extinguishers also come in types, in grades, in several weights. So that's where you need an expert. And so, of course, the fire services are always very ready. The Federal Fire Service is ready to help.
No, so but for a typical residential, my sprinklers, I don't have some of all of those high-tech fire prevention, and I'm looking at the fire extinguishers. I mean, I know they're the smaller ones. I know they're the bulkier ones. It takes a lot of effort to actually carry around. So which will be most recommended?
Okay, you have CO2 fire extinguishers. You have DCP fire extinguishers. Okay, you have foam compound fire extinguishers. So it depends on what area within the residential home you want to install those fire extinguishers. For example, in the kitchen or around the kitchen, it is encouraged that you use a CO2 fire extinguisher. CO2s are generally regarded as clean because they don't leave residue, unlike DCP. They are also effective for most fires. Yeah, I am talking from experience. I've used it for a fire which was from an electrical ignition source, and I used it and it worked that day. So yes, you have, and CO2 comes in several kilograms, several weights. For now, we have 2 kg CO2 in Nigeria. You can keep it in your backpack and carry it, and most people will not know you have a fire extinguisher with you. So it is that portable. Yeah, so that is it. But it depends. If, for example, you have a generator, as most of us do in our residential homes, we will not recommend CO2, for instance. We recommend like a DCP or foam compound, especially with the higher voltage generators, the industrial generators, which many people have in residential in luxury apartments. Yes. Okay. So we recommend a different type of fire extinguisher for that. And the weight, of course, we are looking at 50 kg and more. So, so that's it.
All right. Just a moment. I just want to clarify. Are the Zoom guys in? Okay, they are. So I want to thank you so very much. Like I said, I'm extending an invitation to yourself or your boss to come into the studio for us to explore this topic further, because it's very like that. So by the time the heat gets to a human unbearable level, the equipment themselves should be able to burst off and, Well, they are. Okay, I mean, so this is part of information a lot of people don't seem to be aware of. Anyway, thank you very much.
Fire extinguishers also need maintenance.
Okay.
You don't just buy it and store it. You should store it in a particular place, in a particular kind of temperature, and you also need to be servicing it every 6 months.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Ayo, are you on ground, please? Can we put a hand together for Mr. Ayo? He's going to help us with this session. Please put your hands. I know you are very tired, but don't worry. After this session, you will get a boost of energy. We are going to be having this moment for the next 30 minutes or thereabouts. And the microphone there is over to you. I'll leave it to you to and do the introductions and then have the Zoom. I'm made to understand that 1 or 2 persons are in already. So over to you, sir. Thank you.
All right then. Good afternoon, everyone. It's been a rather long and fruitful day. So we're going into, I think, what is our final session for today. And my plan is to make this as brief as possible. We're looking at the retail market in Nigeria, and it's pretty much a masterclass on retail. How do you navigate the headwinds, and how do you optimize for growth? Because there are quite a number of factors that every retailer has to contend with to ensure that there's growth in their businesses. And to discuss this with me is Laide Agbola. He's joining us by Zoom. He's the CEO and co-founder of Purple. And so we know them from Purple, Maryland, just in Ikeja, and they've posted strong numbers over the last 2 to 3 years. And I think their vacancy rates now are around 2 to 3%, which is really good for a business their size. And then, of course, we have Derek Roper, who is the Group CIO and Managing Director, Novare Equity Partners. I want to thank both of you for joining us today and for your patience. I just want to confirm that you can hear me. Laide, I think you are on mute, and just confirm that you can hear me properly.
Yes, I can.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Fantastic. Mr. Derek Roper,
yes.
I always felt the first time I would meet you would be physical, but I think I can work with this.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Yeah, it would have been nice to be there, but yeah, unfortunately, it's not practical, but thank you very much for the invitation, Ayu.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us. So I will start with Laide. You can just give us your brief comments, and so we keep the ball moving. What have you found critical in navigating, the pandemic, seeing that you run one of the larger retail stores in Nigeria, and you've had to walk around various factors that either make or break a retail business?
Oh, thank you, Ayo. Everything has been everything has been critical. I think the pandemic has really shown what it means to be a resilient business in one way or the other. I think for us, we've looked at it from a perspective of the most critical item in all of this would be funding and liquidity levels. Funding and liquidity levels remain quite a significant part of what is required to ensure retail spaces or retail assets can ride the storm. We've looked at it as well and seen that there needs to be a lot of domestic reliance on funding, and we've sort of, from our own perspective at Purple, we've looked at it and we've attacked issues mostly from ensuring that we have significant domestic funding and using the entire capital structure to create that liquidity level. The flexibility to also be able to relate to retailers and to be able to address their issues as they come in play has been very important, especially on their own individual liquidity levels to be able to sustain the long stretch of the pandemic. I don't think anybody envisaged that we would have a scenario whereby it would have stretched for that long. But that's what has happened. So flexibility in discussions with retailers, even with the strong retailers, has been quite important, and being able to ensure that both the landlord and the retailers are flexible in their discussions and negotiations to be able to move things forward. We've seen a lot of strong demands for people to switch to Naira rentals. And that comes as well with the level of flexibility
that each landlord has within his capital structure. So restructuring the capital structure obviously entails all of those discussions that I've mentioned earlier, which borders around the issues with ensuring that you're able to get naira into your capital structure and less US dollar dependent. But that's a function of both the lenders as well as the landlord being able to work together to get to that point. So it's been a challenging period, but it's level of naira liquidity within the system is the only way to ensure that sustainability on the long term, especially for those of us that are Nigerian entities and are not Nigerians and Nigerian entities that are here for the longer or and will remain so for the longer tenure. So those are the main critical aspects from our own perspective as to what has been critical in ensuring that we'll be able to ride through the storm.
Thank you very much for that, Lydie. I think I'll just move over quickly to Derek. So Novari over the last couple of years has been consistent in expanding, and whenever you prosecute the argument for investing in Nigeria's real estate market, you hear that it's a complex market, it's difficult to get things done. I guess my question to you here is, how do you manage expanding in emerging markets and in this case typified by Nigeria, and how do you deal with the complexities of expanding?
Yeah, I think, thanks for that. I believe, we believe that you need to have a long-term vision and plan. A real estate is a long-term investment. So you've got to be there for the long term. It's not, a 1 or 2 year investment. So you need to take time. You need to understand the market. You need to be on the ground, have good relationships, understand the macroeconomic environment is critical. It can change quickly. So yeah, I would say, spend time in the market, research the market, understand the market, and then slowly take your time, before you actually make new investments. And then, make sure that, you make good long-term investments in the market that you enter, and be committed to the market for the long term. You got to understand that things are going to change from a politically and a macro, and even now we've seen from a pandemic point of view. But all these things goes in cycles, and you're got to be able to sit through them for the long term.
Thank you very much for that. Lydie, my next question goes to you. Now, Derek has just told us very plainly that looking at the market long term and trying to manage the various relationships is critical. And I'm sure he's not the only one who knows that as a foreign investor now investing in Nigeria. I guess the question is, why aren't others doing it? And I think that's the angle of this discussion that I need you to come at this from. What do you think is the current investor sentiment towards investing in Nigeria? Derek has pretty much told us he's long-term. He understands that you need to navigate certain things that might change, whether it might be from a pandemic perspective, from the economy and things along that line, and even politically, which he puts so astutely. Now, what do you think the sentiment is for investing in Nigeria's real estate market?
Derek is an FDI investor, right? From our own perspective, which is purely domestic, we are domestic players. We've been domestic players since we started, and will continue to do so. We have a strong belief in the Nigerian story, and that remains so. We're still building new assets, not apart from our existing assets. We're focusing more on the mixed-use space and creating a hub that encompasses both all of our workshop, eat, play, drink, and live strategy in our 2 locations currently, Reda and Lekki. We're expanding a mixed-use retail to also include mixed-use real estate in all, which includes the live perspective. So from our domestic player perspective, we're very keen and still remain bullish on the Nigerian story. From the international investor perspective, I think there's been a slow movement in their own regards in terms of creating new assets. I think most of them are sitting on their existing asset and looking for opportunity. From what we hear, they're looking for opportunities within the capital market space to be able to morph into REIT structures. I think for us, we are depending more on the domestic space, and we're addressing the issues.
Will I say assets are part of the accessories that every developer, even if it's a landlord who is renting out an apartment or a flat, should basically provide for the benefit of the occupants?
Sorry about that.
I'm
I think
sure.
there's something from technical. Could you help us with that, please? Please continue, Reda.
Okay, so I think from our perspective, we're looking at it from a mixed risk angle, and addressing and creating a flow of cash that allows us to be able to access all of the areas. Even our retail developments themselves are mixed in nature with offices and entertainment, with offices and entertainment and play, as well as food, rather than just pure retail selling retail goods and stuff. So we are we remain quite bullish on the Nigerian story. We remain quite interested in building new assets under the mixed asset structure. But what we've seen is that we are relying more on moving more towards the domestic investor space. And within that space, we're relying more on the asset managers, the banks, the HNIs that are interested in real estate, and we're seeing a good traction in different categories of those assets. For the tenant spaces, we're seeing a strong flow of new retailers and users of such spaces, not just for retail products, but also office type products, office type real estate. And we're seeing a good traction within that. For our popular development, for example, we're building and we're pretty much at about 90% in terms of list of spaces. And we're probably about 12 months away from completion. So from a tenant perspective, from an investor perspective, we've seen a lot of dependency on new capital structures that we had not looked at in the past. Dependency on development finance, domestic development finance, dependency on domestic capital markets. And as we go forward, there will be more dependency on how we look at our structure to morph into more of a RICO as permitted under the SEC guidelines. And that would obviously help us position properly to access more of the institutional funding on the domestic scene as we move forward.
All right, thanks a lot for that answer, Reda. There's quite a number of things that you mentioned. I mean, not least of which is flexibility, the willingness to understand where the market is going and make the right adjustments. Just thinking now, as we segue into the next question, when you look at Novari's emerging track record and you see what they've done in Nigeria over the last couple of years, it's almost as if there are certain things that they understand, about how Nigeria functions. And I guess the question in my head now is, what's your method, Derek, if you don't mind just giving us a bit of an understanding? What is your method for understanding market potential? How do you, as Novari, look into a country or look into a region and then decide on what the market potential is? And maybe you could take us further into site potential, because a cursory analysis of where each of your locations are sited reflects a certain level of thought. So it would be good to understand what drives that. So pretty much, what's your method? What's your framework for market potential? And then also the exact sites that you use. How do you arrive, at those locations?
We're normally very close to all our tenants and specifically the anchor tenants. So we're in continuous discussions with them around where they see opportunities and where they see strong market opportunities. We also typically have very good and strong relationships with people on the ground in the different locations that give us very valuable information. And then also we use professional third-party market research people to do a thorough market analysis of the different areas that we are looking at. So these are companies, that's got many years of experience in developed markets and in other emerging markets on how they analyze the market and how they look at the different sectors from retail that is required and what size specifically you need to look at and what is your income levels. So yes, we spend a lot of effort and money around that market research to make sure that we get the right location, but together with that also that we get the right product, from the sizing point of view and the cost point of view, So I think that's very critical. So it's very much a combination of local relationships, relationships with your tenants, people on the ground, and then professional independent market research.
Thank you very much for that. I mean, quite a while ago, it would have been a bit strange hearing someone, very confidently refer to the need to use research before embarking on projects. But it's a good thing, that we have come to see that it is very possible to connect project success to research, and that just helps to drive the conversation forward. So, Lydie, my next question is to you. Now, the pandemic came in and in a way surprised quite a number of us in the real estate markets and in the global economy at large, and we've all had to make quite a number of adjustments, some significant, some not as much. Now, how have you adjusted your approach to managing your tenants, your customers, and pairing that with your investors, now that we are some can say, leaving pandemic waters? How have you been able to adjust, the way you manage your mall in respect to these stakeholders?
I think tenants are generally never really satisfied, right? So we can only do our best. I think our approach has always been the same. The pandemic has obviously allowed us to be able to shave a lot more of our cost away. And try to remain as nimble as possible in response to market realities. Beyond the pandemic, of course, the issues within the Nigerian market are sort of obviously been further exacerbated by amplified by the FX situation in the country. So we have a double whammy effect. So we're dealing with multiple issues. I think we've seen a scenario whereby price of goods generally have also moved in comparison to what the retailers themselves sell previously. We've been flexible in terms of demands that come from tenants in terms of negotiations on their rates and also on their payment methodologies. Of course, we cannot do some of the things that are being asked for, which can be as ridiculous as you can possibly imagine them. But within the confines of what we have, we've remained flexible, we've been adaptable, and we've moved with the time. And within that period, we've also seen quite significant levels of additions to the tenant role within our space. Within that period, we've also seen quite significant offtake for our new development. Within a mixed structure, we've also seen quite a bit of offtake in a live aspect of our mixed use development, which gives more life to our retail development. And so we've generally been purely flexible, maintained our relationships, moved where we can and not moved where we can, because we cannot really work against the structure within the system of what we have. Of course, we've seen very ridiculous requests. We've seen it but we've seen quite an uptick in performance by retailers. And as the pandemic begins to move out of the way, you've seen better performances in terms of the payment methodologies, being able to make up with their demands and moving forward into the future. So we remain quite committed to our own space, and we've seen that retailers, for the strong retailers, they remain quite committed to their own businesses as well, and they're moving forward with it. Of course, our numbers are generally stronger than where we were last year, probably even better than 2019 figures, because we have a mixed use sort of revenue flow. It also allows us to take advantage of the uptick in the economic situation. For example, we're seeing more advertising going on within that space. That's outside of the rentals that are coming from the horizontal leases. We've seen quite some good revenues coming out from the vertical leases as well. So it's quite an interesting period coming out from the pandemic period and going into the future. We've seen things moving stronger than we actually anticipated in terms of turnaround. So I think the most important thing for us is that flexibility and to be able to relate with our partners or tenants and be able to move forward with them positively. We've seen very low attrition levels, very, very low attrition levels. And even with those attrition levels, we've seen a waiting list that has been able to absorb them quite significantly. This shows you something quite different from what everybody anticipated that retail was going to be heavily hit. We've seen that actually for us in our own approach, which is very mixed in the retail approach, we've actually seen a positive upswing in some things that we're doing. I think also the issues that we're dealing with will probably be around the FX area, repatriations, FX dealings with tenants and stuff. So, but we're dealing with them as we go along, as we move more into the naira dependency, and we'll try to see how we can restructure and move things forward in that aspect. Derek, I'm not sure what has happened to Ayo, but I'm sure it's safe.
Maybe it's just us that's left.
I'm sure it's safe. I'm sure it's will probably come back in. But yeah, Derek, I understand you're doing quite a bit of stuff from the WIT space.
Yes, I'm trying to.
What are your thoughts about that space, given the challenges that have happened?
I just want to see, are you back?
I'm back. It's like I'm interrupting. No, I can just wait. You can continue.
Oh, sorry. No, we didn't hear you there, so we thought we lost you there.
It was just a slight connectivity challenge. But I mean, I have just one last question, so we can just round up. So this question came in, and I was pretty much hamstrung. I was compelled to ask you, and I will go with Derek first, and then Laide, you round up for us. The question here is, what are your projections for Nigeria's real estate market from three perspectives? Number one, local demand. Number two, foreign investment. And number three, the regulatory environment over the next 18 months. So this looks like someone has a paper to write, and they want to get current information. So I'll take the question again. What are your projections for Nigeria's real estate market from three perspectives? One, local demand. Two, foreign investment. Three, the regulatory environment over the next 18 months.
Yeah, if I may answer that, is that us as retailers or real estate, we're very much dependent on what's happening in the economy on a macro basis, and that's the biggest impact on the real estate market and the performance of our real estate. So if our tenants don't perform, if they don't make money, then we don't have a business. So very much the performance of the retail real estate sector is going to depend on the next 18 months on what happens from an economic perspective in Nigeria. And here we talk about all sorts of things about inflation, you know, the income, what impact the pandemic will have on the consumers. Will they still be able to spend money at the shopping malls? You know, at the end of the day, if our tenants don't make money, we don't have a business. It's critically that, you know, they have a business. We're dependent on them and they're dependent on the economy. So yes, things like the currency, you know, is going to play a role. Inflation is going to play a role. You know, what's going to happen to jobs, growth in the economy, that's critical. You know, if the Nigerian economy is going to grow, that's going to be great for us. It's going to be great, you know, for our tenants. So I think from a local demand perspective, you know, I think we are going to see, you know, some improvement in the economy. As Reda said, we've seen that in the last 8 months, you know, from the pandemic, we've done quite well. You know, a number of things helped in that way is that, you know, consumers didn't travel overseas. They stayed in Nigeria, so they spent more money at the shopping malls. They couldn't go on holidays overseas, so they visited the shopping malls more often. So I think in that way, there was a positive impact for the real estate market. We're also looking at other tenants looking to enter the market, specifically, say, on the healthcare side, where we've been approached by international healthcare providers that want to go into some of our properties in Africa. You know, a large part of them, international healthcare providers, are dependent on people to travel to these countries, and that hasn't happened. So they've lost that revenue, you know, so they want to move into Africa, which is positive for us. So I think from that point of view, and demand, you know, people having more certainty around the vaccine, being able to move around, I think foreign investment is still going to be a struggle for not just for Nigeria, but for the rest of Africa and most emerging markets. You know, I think a lot of countries has become a lot more inward focused, and there is not a lot of foreign investment flows globally. And then the regulatory environment, yes, we hope that if there's improvement from a regulatory environment to make it easier for the tenants to operate in, I think that will be very helpful. You know, I think we're all aware that a lot of the tenants are struggling to get dollars. They're struggling to import. They're struggling with electricity. I think that's a huge area where we're focusing on and to improving and bringing down the electricity. But yeah, I think overall, we're fairly positive for the next 18 months for real estate.
All right, thank you very much. Reda, over to you, and you'll be rounding up the session.
Yeah, thanks, Ayo. I think Derek has said quite a lot of what I would have said. I think on the regulatory perspective, a lot is dependent on what the government does in terms of being able to move the economy forward. For us, maybe from our own perspective, we're already seeing an upswing in terms of tenants being able to move forward with the current realities. We've seen this done in 2016. We've seen all of these issues emerge before. We've seen inflation skyrocket. We've seen FX skyrocket. And you know, the Nigerian resilience and the Nigerian story just lets you know that, you know, with this negative movements in markets, we still sort of move ahead with the realities of the ground. We hope there's a level of stability that continues, that comes forward very soon and probably continues. We've said that the central bank is trying to make some steps to ensure that FX provisions are freely available. How sustainable that is, time will tell with the steps that they're making with all the various Eurobonds and all of the various steps they're making with the IMF and the rest. We're hoping that there's a lot of action that's taken in that perspective to ensure that there is enough FX provisions to allow for the market to be able to, freely move forward from all perspective. And that will obviously transcend to tenants and retailers, and obviously transcends to landlords being able to continuously perform on all of their assets. So from a regulatory perspective, we expect some sort of stability going forward. Like you all know, economics and markets are volatile and continue to move in an oscillating uh, methodology. So there will be ups and downs, and I think being able to stay focused, like I mentioned, ensuring that liquidity levels are high, you ensure that you can stay within that market space and continue to operate on a long-term perspective. Um, so on a regulatory perspective, I think that fully sort of sums up what what we're looking at. I think from the other perspective, there needs to be, from the FDI perspective, we do not expect a lot of FDI inflows into the market with the level of uncertainty and volatilities that have been in the near past. Apart from the pandemic, I think the economic situation has obviously affected a lot of thinking around the Nigerian story and the rest of it. But from the Nigerian real estate space, we are quite strong and bullish. We've seen sales of some of our lead products move in a positive direction using a mixed approach. We've seen a lot of interest from domestic players looking for return within the real estate space, given the volatility in the FX and being able to lock up some of their funds within the real estate space. So we've seen quite a significant level of interest from that perspective. And we also understand that there's quite a significant level of interest from the institutional players as well. But then what we've noted from their own perspective is their ability not to be able to stay on the very long term and looking for mid-term approach to making returns within that space that allows for some exit mechanism. We're looking at all of those things and considering all of our steps within the capital market space to be able to access and be able to tap into that space and be more reliant and more reliant on the Nigerian naira investors rather than looking at it from the FDI space. And I think for every economy across the world, you first have to be self-sufficient to be able to build any part of the space of the economy. And real estate is one of those. And we've got to see how we can obviously tap the capital base within the Nigerian space to be able to hold on to assets and be able to grow assets, grade A assets on a mid to long term basis. So I think that sort of captures the two key areas. I think the first area was around was around what general sentiment it is from tenant perspective. For us, our product has been very different from all the other products within the shopping mall space. I mean, we actually really categorize ourselves away from shopping mall space. We have more of a neighborhood center, more of a convenience space, with the emphasis and focus on entertainment and food, and that has really done us well within our own space, rather than dependency on retailers that are actually selling more of the goods that you can find in all of the bigger centers. The way we have cut our price point, our build cost, and all of those things have allowed us to remain flexible over the years with our retailers and users of our space. And that has been evidenced in a level of occupancy, which is currently at about 98%. For every attrition that we've seen about one or two new participation within our spaces. That's definitely due to our costs, our sizes, pricing, and our ability to be flexible with our retailers. The only reason why we have probably about 2% vacancy is probably because of lack of size of space to accommodate the request and demand from specific players that want to take those spaces. So we're quite positive, and even on the new development that we are 90%, and we're just going to the first slab. So we're very positive about what we're doing. We believe that our workshop, Eat, Play, Live, Drink and Live methodology allows us a similar pool of targets on the domestic space for those that are looking to invest in that space and those that are looking to continue in retail or use of retail spaces for their own showrooms and private office spaces.
All right, then. Thank you very much, Mr. Laide and Mr. Derek. I had one or two more questions I would have loved to ask, but we've run out of time. Thank you once again for your patience and for sharing your insights. It's been great having you here. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, Ayu. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Derek. Thank you. Yeah.
Please, can we put our hands together for Mr. Ayo Ibaru, CEO Northcote? You've done a wonderful job. I want to say a big thank you. I know that a lot of us are tired. Tomorrow is going to be another day, and then we are obviously going to explore the topic. Some of the things we should be expecting are 2-3 other panel sessions, residential real estate strategies for apartment developers and investors. We are going to be looking at a proper presentation by the fire service, hopefully, tomorrow, occupiers' requirement and implications for office market across Africa's leading cities. And finally, before we have the award, we're going to be having Proptech in Africa, technological transformation, developing innovative solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to say a big thank you for your patience. I'm made to understand that there's a networking lunch downstairs. I'm very sure it's something to just keep you occupied till you get home. If you're driving, please drive safely. If not, please make sure you maintain all of the necessary safety protocols. Thank you very much. My name is Stephen Lawson. By God's grace, we'll see tomorrow. And remember, hashtag Reda 2021 and then tag Think Mint. God bless you all, and bye-bye for now.